everyone. This is P. I am the head of programming at Bitcoin Magazine for the Bitcoin conference. If you haven't bought your tickets yet, you definitely should. It's going to be fucking incredible. So I asked a number of people, Jay Gould, John, Amanda, Bitcoin Tina, Jimmy Song, and a few others to join me to discuss the absolutely ludicrous proposal that Yellen and the White House made recently that unrealized capital gains should be taxed as income. So let's dive in. Go for it, man.
So before we begin, I want to just read something that I think is important because words have meaning. From the White House to Janet Yellen to Bernie Sanders to Elizabeth Warren to AOC and all the way back to Barack Obama, they started saying something that they're continuing to say. It was on the website actually yesterday. They always say something like the rich must pay their, quote, fair share. These words imply that the rich are not currently paying their fair share. Otherwise, why would they say it? And it is complete and blatant lie. I posted something today. It's a little dated from 2009. It was from mint.com. And they show different cohorts of income in this country. And they show collectively what percentage of the makeup of total income bracket you are if you're in that bracket. And then it shows you what percentage of the dollars collected in tax revenue are. It's significantly higher income collecting the majority of the tax dollars being collected. To say it's completely disingenuous and dishonest to say that the rich aren't paying their fair share when the 1.8% highest paid above $500,000 are paying 41% of all taxes collected. 200,000 to 500,000 is 2% of income cohort. And they're collecting 20% of all the tax revenue there. That's 60%. It's somewhere like 80 something percent, and you only get to 10% of the people. It's off the charts. It's just completely and utterly dishonest. And that's where we start.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. This is so clearly, it's propaganda, right? It is a narrative that is being spun in order to push the public opinion in a specific direction. And it is unfortunately fairly effective. And I think that it's the thing that is so disappointing to me personally about this situation.
There's also one more thing that is interesting. I found another stat here. In 2001, the share of the federal income taxes paid by the top 1% increased from 33.2% to 40.1% by 2018. They're not paying less income tax over the last 20 years as a percentage. That's actually going up, which clearly the gross nominal dollars being collected are also going up, and it's the vast majority of all the dollars being collected. So it's a complete false narrative.
And can you say again, what specifically was claimed in the White House article?
What she said, I don't have it in front of me, I got to find that, but what she said, here's something she said. She said, Senator Selby, this is different from the White House article, I do support eliminating, this is yesterday, stepped up basis. And by the way, I think this is really where they're going with this, to be honest with you, and we'll get to that in a second. I don't think it's unrealized.
It's the only way they can actually get at that.
Yeah, that's right. So it would be a nightmare from an audit perspective, as John knows, to try to do this across all income bracket categories, et cetera. But what they said is, she said, I do support eliminating stepped up basis. The reason is that a very large share of the income, words have meaning throughout this whole discussion tonight, okay? Income of the wealthy individuals is simply never taxed. Individuals hold on to these assets during their lifetime. That income is never taxed. Again, it's not income, it's appreciation. And we know that for some of the wealthiest individuals in the country, they pay very low taxes overall because most of their income takes the form of unrealized capital gains. Unrealized capital gains are not taxable, people, just to be clear. Capital gains are taxable currently. The Biden administration proposed that at death, those gains be taxed. Currently, tax law, when you die, you have property per se, it is passed on to your heirs, and there's a thing called stepped up basis, which means their new cost basis is what the value of the property is at the time that they receive it. So we'll get back to that in a minute. She says, and with careful consideration, not in any way to harm the prospects of family-owned farms and small businesses, because they would have massive taxable events on these events on death. They'd have to sell their farms or get a loan to pay the tax. It wouldn't make sense. There were substantial exemptions to protect them. She's trying to protect them from that. And even if there is not actually taxation imposed at death, getting rid of stepped up basis would mean that an heir would inherit the original basis of the asset. So even if they didn't get rid of it, they're saying they're going to go back to saying that your cost basis is now their cost basis, which I don't think is completely unfair, to be totally honest. I'm not like totally against all of the things, but because if that's not a taxable event unless they sell it, she's just saying, why should you get a stepped up basis on a cost basis? That kind of makes sense, actually, in my opinion, but you could debate that. And when that person eventually sells that asset, the taxes would be paid, and she doesn't say this, but it would be on the original cost basis that your parents bought it for, as an example, okay? All of this is important because they're mincing words and they're conflating things. She's saying things along the lines that the large share of the income from the wealthy individuals is never taxed. That is not true. The current tax code is that you are taxed. There are ordinary income taxes and there are long-term capital gains taxes. There are no longer short-term capital gains taxes because they are now taxed as ordinary income levels. They already fixed that one, so that means they're taxing rich people.
I don't think the tax rate projected is 25%. Check it out. It's correct.
Tina, let Jay finish.
And again, long-term capital gains have a special treatment, and they are to be taxed at a lower rate because you're imposing risk on the investor. This is why they have this. So they define that, guys, by profit earned on the sale of an asset which has increased in value over the holding period. And that asset could be a tangible property like a car, business, a stock, as well as intangible properties, right? Bitcoin, you can't touch it. And then ordinary income is just what most of you probably have. It's if you have employment, you have a job, or it could be interest or dividends, and net income from sole proprietorships, rents, royalties, if you're lucky to have something like that. But what they're trying to say now is that if you have rents on a property or royalties for some kind of an asset, like you have a publishing deal for a book or music rights or something of that nature, they're going to want to look at that asset that is deriving the rents, the royalties, the dividends, the interest, and they want to tax that based on the appreciative value of it going up year to year, which could be forced liquidation for some individuals, depending on who they are. But it sounds like she's also targeting, the top 400 richest people in the world today, right? That is the current narrative and rhetoric. But I just wanted to get out some of the factual information here.
Yeah, no. So, Jay, can I just tag in a little bit if you wrapped up on that point? So, one, short-grain taxes are taxes, ordinary income. Long-term capital gains are based on your income. So from 0 to a certain percent, from 0 to 50,000, I think it's 15 or $0 or 0%. So there is no short-term, there's going to be long-term capital gains. And then from 50,000 to roughly 450,000, it's at 15%. And then everything above that is 20%. The Biden proposal is to move it all toward ordinary income tax. Unless that's changed in the last 3 months, I don't believe it has. If there's any tax accountants there that want to correct me, I don't think that I'm wrong. The second thing I wanted to hit on, Jay, is what you talked about is there's not a real practical way to actually go after unrealized gains because they also have to go off of unrealized losses, and they haven't talked about that either, right? Like literally the methodology that's cited in this letter is going off the Forbes list. It's
ridiculous.
It's a joke, right? Like I tried to go through their like technical, how they use the data to ultimately form their calculation and their methodology, and it's just basically a joke. The thing that I think that, Jay, you hit on, I wanted to bring home, I think the way that they actually get this done, and just to further introduce myself, like I worked in public accounting. I'm a reformed public accountant. I have not practiced in 12 years, so I don't want to come and speak from a public accountant's perspective. P asked me to talk about some of the things that are going on with like institutional adoption, but since we're talking about this piece of it, what I think is important is what can be, I think, a practical way of actually getting at a wealth tax, which is ultimately what this comes down to, is eliminating stepped-up basis. I'm not here to argue the merits for or against whether or not that policy should take place or shouldn't, but that's actually how they're going to get at additional wealth that's trapped in these ways. And I think it's a really great way to do it, right? If you want to further the Ponzi scheme and you know that you're going to print, you're the printer of last resort, and where's all that money, like where's all that wealth being created? It's being created in assets. And so if you're going to continue to build them out to backstop it, you're extracting more value to go into your Ponzi scheme through ultimately measures like eliminating stepped-up basis. It's a way to actually get more tax revenue from investments. And so I think that's where you were headed a minute ago, Jay, with like how they actually practically implement this like unrealized gain.
Yeah, I think they're going to do it on death. It's going to be a death tax that's going to be imposed by eliminating, I think the attempt is to eliminate the stepped up basis to try to collect more revenue.
Exactly.
That's what I think. But that's just step one, right?
So I think that's how they tandem it up with the estate tax.
Look, all they have, really that's what they wanted to do, John. If that's all they wanted to do, there'd be no narrative rhetoric around about unrealized gains being capital gains, right?
But that's the thing, right, Jay? If you think about it, this is just the destruction of wealth, right? Because really what they're doing is they're trying to rebalance everything. They know they've printed way too much money. They know they can't stop printing money. They know our economy is in the crapper. And the only way you're going to really be able to save that is through some form of UBI. So the only way you can retrieve any of this money you keep throwing out there is to figure out a way to tax some stuff that probably even shouldn't even really be taxed just to get the money back. And I think that's why they're doing this. They're really literally throwing darts at a dartboard, trying to figure out ways to pull money back out of the assets that they've inflated. So it's almost like you blow the balloon up and then now we need to come in and put a small hole in it so that we can pull some of the air out of the balloon, because we know next week we're going to put more air in the balloon. And they just don't want the balloon to pop. So they feel like this is the only way they can balance this entire thing out. And I think it's crazy.
It doesn't.
No, not at all.
100% of the 400 richest people's income, and they took all their assets. You can't pay this off.
No, totally.
Just keep pumping afterwards.
No, not. But I think it's important to acknowledge, though, this is a key tenet of modern monetary theory. Right.
This is what I think this is, right? And this has been going on for centuries, guys. They come after the billionaires first, and they take from them, and the people say, "That's not me. I don't have to worry about that, so I don't speak out." This is that they came for the unionist and the socialist, and I didn't speak out because I'm not a socialist. Then they came for the incurables, and I didn't speak out. Then they came for the gypsies and the Jews and the homosexuals, and I didn't speak out because they're not me. And then they came for me because there's no one left to speak out for me. Guys, wake up. They're going to come for you. And they may not come for the poorest people in this country, but the richer people in this country, the middle class of this country, the upper middle class of this country, they're looking and saying, screw that. They're the 400 richest people. Oh, I'm not them. Okay, then they slide it down. It's the top 1,000, the top 10,000. Let me tell you something. Eventually, it's you. And they don't ever change these rules like AMT, Obama affordable health care, the 3.8% tax. They never got rid of that.
Yeah, 100%.
They don't ever get rid of any of these things.
There's talk about putting caps on what you can earn in a Roth IRA. And I don't know other details on this.
Right.
But there's a guy from IRA Financial, Adam Bergman, who was at the Bitcoin conference, who gave a presentation, who's been talking with us. He's a tax attorney, and he's got a business which caters to IRAs and the self-directed. Now, they're coming for you right now.
I have a great stat for this fact.
Because I guarantee you that in the course of the next 20 to 30 years, you will hit those caps if you have a Roth IRA.
Yeah, because Keenan talks about a $5 million cap. And if you're 25 years old, you're likely to have $5 million in your IRA in the future. Just do the math on a CAGR with the amount of money that's being printed and what your growth will be.
What is it? 80% of all the US dollars that have ever existed have been printed in the last 14 years?
Yeah. And here's the thing, that 5 million is going to be worth
13,
really about... Yeah, that 5 million. That 5 million by the time you get there is only going to be worth about $500,000, right? Like you keep printing money, you keep printing money like this, it's going to make even that wealth. And this is what I feel like is going crazy in this country right now. This wealth destruction, the ability to compound interest, all of these different things that especially, which is weird to me because it always comes from the Democratic Party, which always talks about the inequality and the wealth gap. But if you think about it, when you take away the ability for people to invest in assets and actually compound that interest without being taxed on it, you're literally expanding the wealth gap because the people who already have, they already have. So if the only way I'm going to be able to make it back is to actually invest in things so that I can actually build compound interest so that I can at least catch up in the gap in some form or fashion. But they wind up destroying that wealth possibility by bringing in things like unrealized capital gains tax, and then they take that out and put it into the bottom by doing something like UBI. And if you think about that, all it is the government making us more and more dependent. See, the thing is that the Democratic Party they always are a party of trying to create dependency. You just look across the entire scope of what they've done. I'm talking about when they finally changed over. When they were the racist party, it was a little bit different. And then they changed over and they still might have been the racist party because they wanted dependence, and they wound up making the dependents those people who didn't have a whole lot, which happened to look like me back in the day. But now we're in a position now where the dependents, they're trying to make the entire middle class dependent upon the government because they understand that if they have a dependent body, what happens is that dependency makes people vote for them in the future. And this is what I feel like is exactly happening right now in this country. They are establishing ways to make us more and more dependent upon government. And I think that we have to fight back against it and by any means necessary. And I truthfully believe Bitcoin is the best way to fight against all of this bull crap.
Yeah, I totally agree. I think this is all about systems of control, right? You remove people's upside and then you force them to take the dog food you're feeding them, and that allows you to have control over them. Jimmy, I want to give you a chance to comment, weigh in, and then Yellow, I want to hear your thoughts because you've had your hand raised for a while.
I did write a tweet earlier today about how we're taxed like 4 times now already on our income, and this is going to be tax number 5, like unrealized capital gains. I think there's something really crazy going on here. I thought Lamar made some really good points about how it's really a way to get back some of them. They know that they printed too much money, that it's in the hands of rich people. So they're trying to calm down some of the poorer people by taking some of that back. And they're doing that through taxation. Unrealized capital gains I'm not even sure how you enforce that, right? Because Mark Zuckerberg is worth billions of dollars, but the way he gets money is he keeps his stock in Facebook, and he gets loans against that stock. That's how he operates. And that's the way in which he could continue to get upside on his business and so on. And that's how a lot of people in the US are. They don't actually have that many liquid assets. They just borrow against the assets that they have. And this in turn causes like this Cantillon effect of additional money printing, right? Because all of those loans that they get against their stock or their assets, it's all newly printed money. So that in turn causes even more money to be printed and go into the economy. That causes higher prices and stuff. You do a wealth tax like this, they now have to liquidate this stuff. They can't, I suppose they could take out a loan against it and hope that the tax goes away eventually. But they're most likely going to have to sell. Now you have less leverage that these people have. You're destroying like this money creation avenue. You contract the money supply as a result of this. It's not going to be pretty. You do this from some of the wealthier people you really like contract the money supply significantly. And that means that the Fed has to print even more and give out even more loans on even less of a basis. You get even more fragile. I just think this thing has disaster written all over it.
I got a question for you. So do you see a scenario or possibility where, because a guy like John Malone from Liberty Media, right? He did this. He was the master at this, never paid any taxes. He just borrowed against his holdings and he kept growing through acquisitions and his net worth kept going up and just kept borrowing against it, never had to sell anything. And he serviced the debt with the loans as well. Really genius, actually. So why not, in a low interest rate world that we have, which is going away anytime soon, let's say he has $100 million that he wants to borrow, and he's currently borrowing it at 3%, just say. Why couldn't they just impose a very small tax on the amount borrowed? Because otherwise, for him to get the $100 million, he would have had to sell assets. And then he could just use the loan that he's borrowing to service the debt. So essentially, it's increasing his interest rate, essentially. You have the interest rate from the bank, but then you have an imposed tax from the government. And the tax from the bank could just be like almost like a LIBOR plus, right? Like he may have a 3% interest rate from the bank, and then the government says, if you're borrowing money against your assets, we're going to tax you 5% on the amount you borrow. They're not going to not borrow to do that, and they're certainly not going to sell their assets.
Bro, they will move, Jay. Like, I believe billionaires are going to move.
I think that's true.
They're going to be straight.
Hold on. So I just retweeted something that I learned about many years ago about lead trusts and Harvard alumni. Go read what I tweeted. I DM'd it to John, to P, to Jay. Go take a look at that. A couple of things you have to understand about super rich people.
All right.
Number one, they set up foundations. So foundations enable you to take substantial amounts of money and keep it untaxed for centuries, certainly for decades. And the power of having substantial wealth is the power of using it and having access to it. That money pretty much goes on. There are many things in the tax code which enable the super wealthy to very much mitigate the effects of these things. These things will fall down on upper income, not fantastically wealthy people. They will fall on people who might be considered rich, but are not super rich. Because the super rich can do things that other people can't do. So when Bloomberg has the giving pledge, whatever the hell he calls it, he gives a substantial amount of money into a foundation. That foundation can be controlled by family members for decades, which is the real power of having money, because you have massive social influence, political influence. This is the power of real money. People who have tens of billions of dollars can't spend it, but they sure as hell like that political influence. And it's serious. Go look at lead trusts. The game is set up so that those who have well into the nine figures and above can do things that other people can't do. So if you have 20 or $30 million, which sounds like a lot of money, you get screwed because you can't defend yourself from these things. But when you have 500 million, $1 billion, $2 billion, there are lots of things you can do. And so it's not going to be quite what you're saying. It's going to fall on the heads of people who are successful, who want to leave money to their family and maybe to others. But it's going to slam those people. It is not going to hit the super rich. And really, if you want to change the tax code, you need to change it to a consumption tax. Eliminate all capital gains, all income taxes, because a consumption tax will capture the spending of the super rich. And there are plenty of things that can be done to mitigate the effects on substantially lower income people. But this is a game about power. And this is a game when you can grant special favors and dispensation to people who are not hit by this tax code. That's the real power that Congress has. The ability to grant special tax benefits to different groups and classes of people. When I say classes, I'm not talking economic classes. I'm talking about people.
Tina, let me ask you a question. I'm aware of this. And you're right. For the richest individuals in the country, the billionaires, this is a strategy. And it's really funny. The Giving Pledge with Warren Buffett and all these guys. It was really funny when I saw it was Garrett Camp, the founder of Uber, decided he's going to put 50% of his wealth in there. Just do some math on that. Anyway, but if you look, and by the way, they're doing really good things. I'm not criticizing the effort, but there is a tax benefit to it. The billionaires are mostly all aware of it. I can imagine they'd have to be, right? If they're not, I don't know what rock they're living under. The politicians are mostly aware of it as well. The lobbyists are making them aware of it. They're all aware of it. So why is there rhetoric around this? What is the goal? Why do you think they're doing it? Because to me, I didn't finish. Got technically on the plate.
Go for it, Jack.
Because it seems to me, I think it's just number one, they're pandering to their constituency base, their voters, and number two, it's a slippery slope that leads to the others like us.
It's the politics of envy. But here's something you need to know. Everyone needs to know this. There's no point in discussing rates if you don't discuss definition of income. Taxes are all about definition of income. So when you start defining unrealized capital gains as income, that's definition of income.
Totally.
When people talk about 80 and 90% rates from the 50s and 60s, the definition of income was very different. The 1986 Tax Reform Act eliminated credit card interest as a deduction. There were all kinds of tax shelters people could engage in. People do not understand that definition of income is critical.
That's why I started
have a discussion without it.
I totally agree.
That's what we started at the top of the call with.
Yeah, I totally agree, Tina. And that's what's really going on here, right? To Jay's point. Essentially, the government or Yellen, the White House, they are basically putting a target on quote unquote wealthy individuals' backs because that is a politically acceptable way to shoehorn this past all the constituents.
They're pandering to the bottom 50% of income earners in the country. And this is a true fact. The bottom 50% only pay 2.9% of the tax revenue collected for the government for federal taxes.
There was a girl who wore a dress that said "tax the rich." Like this is a really phenomenal way to raise money and pander to your base. If you guys remember, if you look at how Mitt Romney lost the 2012 election, he basically was like polling like neck and neck. And this is the point that I think Jay was raising. And then he goes, 47% of Americans don't pay any income taxes. And there was like a secret video. Go watch the polling from that day through. This is an extremely effective way. It polls really well within certain demographics, a really large demographic and an increasing demographic, like one where you can say, what's wrong with society? This is another one of those pointing to the symptoms and not actually to the cause.
I do want to give Yellow a chance to speak because he's been extremely patient. And
my bad.
Go ahead, Yellow. What's up?
Thank you for having me, first of all. I actually have a question for Jimmy Song. I'm a huge fan. What's his thoughts on banana bread?
God damn it. Banana bread is an important asset to diversify one's holdings into. As you and I have talked about for a couple days back, bananas are actually a really interesting token, which has a physical aspect associated with it. We talked about the seeds, the fact that Cavendish bananas are all clones, and that there's a terrible fungus that's attacking all Cavendish bananas.
I know it's off topic and I'm hijacking a little bit. I'm sorry about that. But
no.
I just want to notice, and I'm a big on that banana bread is a great store of carbohydrates. It energy through time and space. And if you want to know more, you should read the Banana Standard, and thank you for your time.
I am going to bring us back around to this specific conversation. Let's continue.
We left off in a banana republic, or how we're leading to a banana republic, and if that would get us to segue back to the wealth tax. I think Tina led a really sharp point that I think is worthy of noting. But this doesn't hit like people that have a 9-10 figure net worth. This is folks that are going to be in that 7-8 figure net worth, which probably is going to comprise a lot of people in this room in the next 10 or 15 years at worst, even if you're really bearish like me, all joking aside. Lamar.
It's going to hit the people too, bro.
I get it. So let me finish this thought, and then I'll let you get any pertinent thoughts in. So I think it's important to understand there are a lot of ways to manipulate this thing. And by the time that this thing gets enacted, most people have things figured out before the actual tax laws get enacted. When the Dodd-Frank tax, after the 2008 financial crisis and the banks were the enemies, which they are, but anywho, in terms of political rhetoric at the time, literally of the 10 most important provisions of Dodd-Frank, 8 of them they already found workarounds for 8 or 9 of them, I believe, before the actual law actually was implemented. And so this is a function of making a lot of accountants richer. I actually don't see, I'm going to take a counter and thought here and just say, I don't actually see an unrealized tax bill being passed. I think it's political suicide in 70 to 80% of the country's congressional districts. And I think it's a really effective way to raise money and to insulate your power for about 20 to 30% of the congressional political districts. The reality is very few things can get passed in this country, and things like that I think are going to be really difficult to do. And not just from a political standpoint, but actually from a pragmatic standpoint. That's why I brought up the methodology they use. They're literally relying on Forbes to actually find the 400 richest people that they're citing in this particular report, the 400 richest families. The reality is, I think Tina laid out that last point around where the burden will actually fall, and it'll fall on that next bracket. It won't fall on the uber wealthy. And this is one of those things, to bring it back to the conversation that I think circles us all. This is why Bitcoin matters. This is why you need hard money. This is why you need censorship resistant money. This is why you need to start to build community, which I think is taking place in a much more sophisticated way in Washington than the entire time I've been, with Amanda's efforts, with probably Bitcoin Magazine helping with putting a lot of the content out that they are. I know a lot of people personally that have been on the phone with Senators Ted Cruz and Toomey and Loomis, etc. And so this is one of those things where we got to step up our game as well and be part of the narrative that takes forward.
Here's what's crazy. The part I was saying is it's going to hit the people with 6-figure net worth too, John. The people who might be custodians and been saving for the last 30 years in their 401k and barely getting up to $1 million. You know what I mean?
Yeah, you're not wrong, Lamar. You're not wrong. I would actually say further, you're going to wind up having forced selling.
Yeah.
So you're going to have a bunch of people selling assets instead of accumulating assets.
Right. And then what happens when you start having forced selling? What happens to the actual price of those assets? When you start having all of this
volatility. You see it in March, right? We've seen this with the Bitcoin price every year in March or April, whatever, where the Bitcoin price dips because people have to sell to pay their trading bills, et cetera, et cetera. This is one of the things that happens with a lot of estate taxes, even in current day, right? Most people that are inheriting large dollar estates aren't actually receiving a bunch of cash in bank accounts or money market accounts, right? They're inheriting real estate, right? They're inheriting perhaps shares in a company. They're inheriting the family business, et cetera. And this is where sort of Jay was hitting in on, and Jay and I were talking about the step-up basis conversation. That will be the easiest way to attack it. If you really wanted to increase revenue, especially from that targeted group of individuals, the way you do that is you basically increase their tax basis, or you remove the ability for the heirs to inherit the tax basis. And you say, this isn't a taxable event. They don't have to pay taxes necessarily then. But when you do die, or when you do give it to them, or when they sell it, then they're going to have to pay it based on a different basis.
John, they'll probably do one of the two things. So they're probably going to do that. They may also say that we won't tax you on this liquidation event of your parents passing away. But if you pass away and still have it, that will be a liquidation event for your kids. You can't just keep it. They're probably going to prevent the person down infinitely, indefinitely.
So you're saying you're saying there's an elimination of the estate tax? Is that what you're saying? Because I don't think
that's not what I'm saying.
Eliminating the estate tax. So hold on.
That's not what I'm saying.
The reason you get a step up in basis is because you get hit with an estate tax. So as a quid pro quo, you get the step up in basis. So if you own XYZ stock at basically 0 and now it's at 2,000, you get the step up in basis because for any estate over some amount, you pay a very large estate tax.
Tina,
so
I want to make sure.
Forget that. You can't eliminate.
Tina, I just want to make sure that the audience understands what you mean when you say step up in basis. Can you define that for us?
Okay, so the basis is the price you paid. You bought Microsoft stock. You bought it back in 1989, and you paid the equivalent of 20 cents for it. Today, it's selling at $300 and some odd dollars. That's a step up in basis. But you own $30 million worth, and you leave an estate of whatever, which is in excess of the exemption. The exemption today is $11.7 million per person. So together, a couple can leave twice that amount, $11.7 million times two, to their children as an exclusion and without paying estate taxes on it. They're going to drop that 11.7 to 5 million something. So you won't get as much of an exclusion, and you'll get hit on estate tax over that amount, and you'll pay the difference in the gains. The reason Warren Buffett likes the estate tax so much is that when all kinds of people have to sell their businesses because they can't meet the estate tax because they may not be liquid, he gets to buy it on the cheap.
That's the point that I was making. It's forcing the selling in those areas for people that basically exactly. And it basically distorts markets. Hey, Tina, just because I think you're not wrong in everything you're saying, but just to repeat it, because for people who don't know what step-up basis is, you probably got lost in the next two bullet points you are. And so let me just literally recite this. Tax Code of the United States holds that when a person... Yeah, it's fine. The Tax Code of the United States holds that when the person, beneficiary, receives an asset from the giver, the benefactor, after the benefactor dies, that asset receives stepped-up basis in which market value at the time of the benefactor dies, a stepped-up basis can be higher than before death cost. So, like, simply put, when you're inheriting an asset, right, you basically can get the market price of the asset as your basis when you receive it, because the person who likely has given it to you, this is assuming that it's higher than what you received it at. So if you're getting a piece of real estate that is now worth $1 million, but it was bought for $100,000, step-up basis now allows for you to own that real estate at $1 million. So when you sell it for $2 million, you would now owe $1 million in taxes versus $1.9 million. Is that more clear, P?
Yeah,
Should
absolutely.
I try that one more time?
No, that makes sense. Thanks, man. I also want to give just a chance for Shannon. You requested to speak. You've been up here for a while.
Really quickly, P, can we let Tina finish that? I think he's about to finish the last thought that I think was really important. Tina, if I didn't interrupt you, and then Shannon, if you want to jump in on that, but I think you were really whining a really important thought that I was trying to
I don't remember what that was.
Okay, I think you were tying together the importance of...
If you do, you can fill in for me because I've completely forgotten what I was
saying. No worries, Tina. So, but I think what you're doing is basically tying like the additive component of where like you can extract more tax revenue, right? So just by using the illustration I do, so if you basically eliminate step-up basis, you're able to actually hit that group harder, and more likely than not, a bunch of people that don't have the ability to pay that tax with liquid cash. And so what they wind up doing is they force sell assets, especially things that might not necessarily have huge markets. So imagine if you're buying, you get a piece of real estate because your parents have had the family home for 30 years, Cantillon effect of inflation, et cetera, has now driven that price. So this is a middle-class home, probably in Chicago. It's now worth a couple $1 million perhaps. And so now, obviously fast forwarding 10 or 15 years, the way that they'd be able to get more tax revenue is to obviously tax you on the basis that was originally the original acquisition of that asset. So an example I used before, 100,000 versus $1 million, obviously taxing 1.9 million makes that a lot more tax revenue, but also it distorts markets, right? So like one of the reasons we have wash sale rules, P, and this is where I was trying to bring this thought home on like market distortion or perhaps even more volatility, is that like people are going to be selling for no other reason than to pay a tax bill that they wouldn't have had if someone didn't die or if someone didn't hand them something. And so it doesn't allow for like intergenerational wealth. It doesn't allow for you to transfer your energy through time and space in the way that Bitcoin is perfected. I think that's why it's like this type of thought is super, super anti-Bitcoin. And I think something that should be concerning, even though I actually don't think that it's super practical. I think the stepped-up basis attack is definitely practical. I think the ability to start like taxing people on appreciation is going to be much more difficult, not only politically to pass, but also like from an accounting standpoint to enforce.
They're going to try to tax you on the money you borrow against assets.
By the way,
I think also from a political standpoint, like you were saying earlier, if you even look at the whole idea of tax the rich, the problem is what I was saying earlier. I think there is asymmetric information about what's really going to happen, right? Like the people who are on the bottom rungs of society that actually need to save and start investing in assets to start building up their own net worth and wealth, they don't understand that those same laws are going to be affecting them because it's not affecting them immediately. And the problem is, as those laws begin to affect them, they are going to be further behind in the wealth gap, which is not good for anyone who is trying to actually grow generational wealth to pass down for generations so that their next generations can stop being in the situations that they're in. And I think that's the part from a political standpoint that it almost is manipulative to be all the way. What politics aren't manipulative? Let me rewind that. So it's this politics as usual to try to manipulate a base to make them believe that it's us versus them, when the truth of the matter is the us versus them is probably really supposed to be the government versus the people, the state versus the people. And I think that's what really we need to start looking at and understanding that some of these policies and the things that they're encouraging is not going to only affect these quote unquote billionaires that they are targeting, but it's also going to affect everyday people. And I think that winds up putting us into a far darker hole when it comes to marginalized communities in this country, man. And that's the part that makes me very passionate. And that's the part that just makes me very upset that they try to do things like this. Because you never can get out of the hole is if every time you get out of the hole, they change the rules about what the hole is, you know what I'm saying? And what income is.
It's also probably worth, just to bring this home a little, P, and I won't be very long. This is just a cyborg yelling. Like, pretty much. So this isn't even proposed. Like, this is political suicide, I believe, for 70% of the country. Take a different position. Take a different position than me. That's mine. It's okay for us to disagree. But let me just say this. Right now, this isn't a serious proposal that's getting any traction. And these are types of things that have been talked about for years. So it's not like I'm just putting this out there from a perspective of anybody that's sitting there listening, worried about calling their accountant tomorrow, be like, yo, what am I tax? Take a deep breath. There's no new tax.
All right, John.
Great. Wait, Jay, before you jump in, I just want to comment and say that's a very, Lamar and John, you just framed a really eloquent way of thinking about this, which is that it's ultimately an attack on what Bitcoin is designed to fix. Specifically, it's an attack on low time preference. It basically forces you to have a higher time preference. And I think that's a really important frame for us to acknowledge, because that is the type of attack, the type of insidious attack that we are most likely to see on Bitcoin going forward. Bans like the one that China has implemented, like, it's comical at this point, right? We all laugh, the price barely is affected. We're just, China, good fucking luck. But these types of things where the narrative is being shifted, and more importantly, the incentives are being shifted, that is really fucking dangerous. And I think it's so important that we are, whether or not these are imminent threats, as some of us think they are, or just proposals, John, as it sounds like you think they are, I think we have to be hyper aware of these things regardless, because these are the types of threats that have the largest likelihood of undermining everything that we're trying to achieve with Bitcoin.
So,
Pete, can I say this really quick, Jay?
Man,
just really quick.
I'm trying to talk.
I'll go ahead.
I'm trying to be respectful here.
And then Lamar, I want to hear your thoughts. Go ahead, Jay.
Apparently, it's different in spaces. You got to wait for everybody to finish. So, John, I agree with what you're saying, but I don't in a way. It's dangerous to have this thinking of there's nothing to worry about. But Joe's in here as a listener. He's not on stage. He generally does a lot of this.
No, that's not my take. Just for the record, that's not my take. That's why I'm here joining the conversation. I didn't want people panicking and calling their accountants and thinking that this was a tax bill that we're talking about, like the infrastructure bill a couple weeks ago or something. That's all. I just wanted to put some component of it. That's all, or some context to it. But I do think it's important. I do think it's a threat.
No, but that's my whole thing, though, John.
Hey, Lamar, after you're done, though, let Shannon jump in because he's been waiting for a while.
Yeah, for sure. Go ahead, Jay, man.
I didn't ask you a damn thing. I just wanted to say that I think it's important to understand that, and I started the call off when we started this room saying that words have meaning. They started this rhetoric in 2008 under Obama's Hope, whatever the fuck campaign he had, when he kept saying they're not paying their fair share. The fair share line I've never heard before. They've been pounding that drum and slowly introducing more and more overreaching tax strategies. The first one was the Obama affordable health care tax. Obviously, it made sense if you believed in doing the affordable healthcare because they try to how to pay for it, they say, right? They could have just printed more money. But they add the 3.8% tax. And then when Trump comes in and has his whole tax plan and tax cuts, doesn't cut that tax, right? They're never going to take these things away. So they slowly creep these things in. They start with the rhetoric. They start doing it this way. They lean it. They do the same thing at the Fed, right? Where they'll say things like, we're thinking about tapering. And then they want to see how the market reacts. And if the market doesn't overreact, they might actually try it. They try a few more signaling of verbal, expression. And then eventually they try it and they see how the market reacts there. And then they push further and they push further. They're doing the same thing here with this stuff. This is what their strategy is. They push it out there.
Tax the rich.
Wait, hold on, John.
Their fair share goes back to 1890.
John,
Warren Harding.
I do want to give David a chance to speak.
So nothing's changed, John. It's always been the same, right?
No, it's not the first time that said the fair.
Hold on.
John, it is a strategic word. The words, listen to the words, listen to the rhetoric.
I get it, but I'm saying you just said the first time you heard it was in 2008 with Obama.
Fair share.
I'm telling you, this goes back. I'm telling you that this goes back to the election of 1890. With,
John, hold on. John, it doesn't. I think I take your point, but it doesn't actually matter. Like when they are pushing this narrative, Jay's point rather still stands, which is that
it's accelerating.
It is accelerating. Absolutely. Jay, you and I were talking about how like I feel foolish being continually surprised by like how rapidly we are accelerating along this timeline. Yeah. But this is how it goes. To your point, you're absolutely correct. It's narrative, and then it's how does the public respond, and then it's basically okay. They didn't respond too harshly, or maybe only a little bit harshly. Great, we can lock this in, and it will never be removed. You see this in every single aspect of our lives, including like fucking bridge tolls. I live in the SF Bay Area. The Golden Gate Bridge. There was not supposed to be a bridge toll on that, and they have increased it every fucking year, and every fucking year it's announced as being like a temporary measure that is never going away. And I think that it's so important, as you said, that we are understanding these ideas
the thing that
as
gets
a tax.
Me the most riled up, like I was the other day.
Jay, wait, hold on. Go ahead and finish this thought, and then I do want to let Shannon.
But the thing that really gets me going is that it's a class warfare. It started with Obama creating this class warfare of the rich and the poor. And yes, John, they've been doing this for many years, but not as strategically calculated as they've been doing over the last 15 years. 13 years, I should say, very strategic. And it's just dumping over into people like Elizabeth Warren now that are acting on the total polar opposite side of Donald Trump in the way their politics are. And then you have AOCs and you have multiple ones on that side of the aisle that are getting more and more radical. It's dangerous rhetoric that needs to stop. You need to have people step up in Congress and stop this shit because it's class warfare. It's pitting the majority against the minority. I don't care what the reasoning is and what those classes of people are, whether it's race, religion, creed, wealth. I don't give a shit what it is. When you're pitting people against each other and it's a farce because they're the ones creating the problem with the money printing, they know they are. It's completely and utterly disingenuous at best at what they're doing right now because they're blaming the rich they're not saying it per se, but they're saying they're not paying their fair share. Like it's an implication, though. It's very smart what Obama did and his team, and they've latched onto it and they haven't let it go because it assumes to the average person listening, the rich people are getting richer, and they're using words like income. They've been doing this in the media, by the way, for at least a decade, when they would say the stock market's roaring and Mark Zuckerberg's income last year is way up and because the stock is up. And it's like, that's not his income. They've been saying that, and I've been correcting that on CNBC for years, and they say it on CNBC, guys.
No, but this is, and to your point, and then I do want to let David and Shannon speak. I also want to welcome Dustin and Joe to the stage. This is a classic playbook. You take a minority that people are already biased against for various reasons, and then you focus that ire and you focus that anger, and then you blame them for the things that you have actually, the problems that you, and by you, a government or any specific entity that's trying to amass power has actually created. So this is a classic scapegoat strategy. This is, I hate to fucking bring this up because you immediately are an idiot if you bring this up, but this is exactly what happened in Germany. And this is exactly what we're seeing here. And I'm not saying that like, I'm not comparing Nazi Germany to America, but these are like very tried and true tactics. Isolate groups, create narratives that divide them, and then foment anger between various groups, and then once you eliminate one group, you shift to a different group and you move them out as well, and because the rules never go back.
There's literally
we got a ton of those
from Adolf Hitler, My Struggle. You can read the book and he can teach you things that do this.
Yeah, and Lamar, to your point, like this happens with race and Jim Crow laws and everything.
No, I'm talking about. I ain't talking about race. I'm talking about. Think about it. Vaccinated, not vaccinated.
Perfect
like,
example.
Think about it. Like it's like there's a division constantly being had. Because what people don't understand is as long as they can keep you divided, they can keep control. Right. They can keep control over you, period. I don't care if it's race. I don't care if it's class. I don't care if it's vaccine. What you start to realize is these narratives. And that's why when John was saying that, I thought he was saying the same thing Jay heard. But the truth is that these seeds that are being planted, man, these seeds are being planted over and over again, just looking for fertile enough soil to make people believe that even things like potentially socialism is better than capitalism, or right? Like you got all of these seeds that get planted, and then what happens is now you have people who think socialism better than capitalism, people think capitalism better than socialism, and what do you have? What P said, a divide. The seeds get planted first, and then the divide comes later. It happens over and over again, and we're seeing it with this rhetoric of we need to go after this income. When what Jay even said earlier about Mark Zuckerberg, the really wealthy in the world are not having income because they're borrowing against their assets. So there is no income. So the only people actually making income are us. It's not the billionaires, it's us. We're the ones making income. We're the ones going to get taxed for that income. And the same way that large corporations don't hardly ever have to pay tax, the same way large billionaires don't ever have to pay tax, it always comes down to us.
Shannon, you better jump in right now, man. I'm going to try to block for you for 3 seconds.
Right now.
Shannon,
all right, thanks, Shannon.
And the moral of this story is that you need to have an off-grid Bitcoin mining farm that people don't know about instead of investing in other assets.
Yes.
But more importantly, what are you supposed to do about it? That's the big problem, right? The government tends to do whatever the fuck they want, and they have a bigger voice. Tina's loud, but their voice is bigger.
I'll chime in on an opinion on that if you'd like. So what I think is what's really critical is Bitcoin needs to get big. Bitcoin needs to be in the tens of trillions and hundreds of trillions of dollars. Because basically, the bigger Bitcoin gets, Bitcoin effectively almost becomes its own nation state. And it becomes a weapon. And they know it. And so we need to get other people to own and hold Bitcoin because that does become an immensely powerful tool. And people usually like to protect things that they own. And so it's not perfect, but it really does become very helpful when people have their own wealth to protect. So you really want to encourage people. This is my opinion, and probably others disagree with that. But it's an amazingly powerful tool. And Bitcoin will get to some size when Bitcoiners will be able to have significant influence on politics because they'll be extremely wealthy and they'll be able to hire lobbyists and do the things necessary to influence the way things work in this country and other countries. That's my personal opinion.
I think you need memes. And I'm not joking when I say that. Like the pay your fair share is basically a meme. You need taglines. You need something that resonates, that's digestible and easily repeatable so that people can understand. And what that is, it needs to be telling the truth. It needs to educate people with the truth and taglines. It's the only way to counter what they're doing in their taglines.
So I could not agree with you more. Yellow and I are literally chatting in the background about like how funny it was that he came up and made the joke about bananas. I think that is so important because one, humor is one of the most effective ways to communicate, especially when it is strategically interspersed in super heavy or dense topics. But more than that, yellow is part of what is it? It's like the meme factory, open parenthesis, this is not a real thing, close parenthesis. And I think those types of initiatives are actually like, they're funny, but they're also super, super important because
remember when Zuckerberg went to Congress and the Congress people asked him the stupidest questions and he's a congressman? We sell advertising. When they were like, what kind of revenue, where do you get your revenue from? After like an hour of him talking about how they derive their revenue, like those kind of things, we have to find that type of shit and make that viral to show that the people that are actually out here proposing these ridiculous things, it is ridiculous because look at all the other ridiculous shit they're saying. And then you explain that, but it's got to be like 30 seconds to a minute on those types of clips.
Yeah, totally.
All right, Bitcoiners, I want to tell you about our newest sponsor. This show is brought to you by Ledin.io. I have been super, super impressed with the guys over at Ledin. I've actually known the co-founders, Adam and Mauricio, for a very long time. I've had the pleasure to watch them build Ledin up from a tiny, tiny startup to now a super impressive institutional grade Bitcoin and crypto lender. Y'all, I'm so impressed with these guys. They are offering some of the best rates out there. I don't think anyone even comes close to touching them. You can get 6.1% APY on your first 2 Bitcoin that you deposit into Ledin interest accounts, and you can get 8.5% on USDC deposits. I mean, I know all the competitors. They're not even close. If you're going to put your crypto and your Bitcoin into an interest account, Ledin is by far the best. And on top of that, like I said, these guys are hardcore Bitcoiners, and they know the products and the services that Bitcoiners want and appreciate. They come up with B2X. It allows you to put your Bitcoin in, they leverage it up, and you can, with one click of the mouse, get twice the exposure to Bitcoin. So if you're super bullish, Ledin has you covered with a super, super easy way to get leverage with B2X. And then on top of that, they know that Bitcoiners care about your reserves. They know that Bitcoiners don't like under reserved and not full reserved financial institutions. So they are pushing the frontier in transparency in the digital asset lending space. And they are the first digital asset lender to do a full proof of reserves and proof of attestation through a Mariano LLC, a public accounting firm. So the Ledin guys, they know what Bitcoiners like. They are legit. I encourage you guys to check them out. Do your own research and go to ledin.io. That is LEDN.io and learn more.
Okay, Shannon, it sounds like you were distracted / forgot what you were going to say. David, what you got for us?
So 2 things. One is Ron Wyden has already taken the stance that it's the billionaire income tax. So that is the messaging now. It's billionaire income tax. And the stat that I think everyone needs to remember with this is in 1913, when the 16th Amendment went into effect, less than 1% of people paid a 1% net income tax. That was where income taxes started. It's not going to stay with the billionaires.
Slippery slope.
Yeah, totally. And again, this has nothing to do with facts or reality. This is a narrative game, right? This is about convincing constituents that a thing is true that is not necessarily true. And in this case, definitely not true. So that is the terrain that we are fighting on. And I think it's really important that we acknowledge that. Joe, I want to acknowledge you and thanks for joining us. What are your thoughts? And then I want to go to Dustin.
Thanks, Pete. And thanks for all the great discussion in the room. A lot of great points. And I was really enjoying listening. I will say this. I believe that this is a threat to be taken seriously. I believe this creep towards additional taxation is not to be minimized or just pushed off as something that'll never occur. I think it's something that we really need to look at very closely. That being said, I do think part of the messaging and the narrative that was overlooked here is that people are seeing the real wages stay flat. They're seeing a lot of situations where the middle class, particularly the poor, are trapped in these cycles where they can't leverage the Cantillon effect that a lot of other classes can. And they are desperate for politicians to be relatable, right? To put on a dress and say, tax the rich and make them understand or feel, it should show some virtual signaling for why they understand their plight. And I think that's a big part of this, right? Because if you actually look, and Jay made this point earlier, the amount of revenue under most of these proposals, it's not going to solve the spending. It's not going to be budget neutral. It's going to be taking on a tremendous amount of debt that is essentially monetized by the Fed. So you have to look at really what is the point of this? Why are you emphasizing these, tax changes and going after the wealthy elites here if it's not going to solve the spending problem? In fact, in many respects, it's going to actually be negative, and it's going to result in lower tax revenue for the reasons Tina said, because you're going to just find more and more loopholes and way to safeguard that income. So I think part of it is just to understand where we're at in this overall fiat cycle and why the politicians, from a political standpoint, have in their vested interest the desire to go after and identify the boogeyman and blame that person and bring that person to task and say, now we've raised taxes on the rich. It's a common historical thing. You need a boogeyman to point at to say this is why you middle-class Americans and lower-class people are struggling. And it's an easy way to deflect from the overarching problem of the fiat standard and the nonstop money printing, which is, in the words of Stanley Druckenmiller, has been the single greatest force for the concentration of wealth inequality in the last 50 years, has been the Federal Reserve and its monetary policy. So I think it's important to not lose sight of that context.
Yeah, that's a great point. Dustin, did you have any thoughts?
I mean, I totally agree with Joe, which is he says so much awesome stuff, it's hard not to. But yeah, honestly, I mean, Janet Yellen's been saying this over and over, and somehow it ends up getting the headlines. But my own personal theory is that it's hard to imagine Congress passing a law that would hurt themselves so dramatically Like, they're all millionaires. They all have probably tons of unrealized capital gains. I imagine if they do pass them like that, they're going to have so many loopholes for themselves that hopefully we have access to too. I don't know, but I suspect there is a demand, like Joe's saying, for sounding like they're doing something. So I wouldn't be surprised if there's like unrealized capital gains tax law that's passed at some point, and then it like actually doesn't do anything, but it sounds really good. And that's on theme with what's happening with these bills. They're like revenue neutral bills. Everyone knows they're not, but it's just this kind of weird political theater that they're playing right now.
I don't think it's necessarily weird political theater. I don't think it is. I think they're trying to push these narratives and see what sticks, see what doesn't.
And it's strategic. If it's theater, it's strategic. It's calculated and strategic. I agree.
I want to say something else. I viewed taxes a little bit differently when I was earning, right? When I was running my company and making a lot of money, I looked at it as, well, I got to pay tax. I made a lot of money. That's good. Then when you're done and you have money that you'll die with and you're wealthy and you're not working and earning anymore, it's a real drag when they have all these tax implications and they're adding more taxes and they're proposing the ideas of adding more taxes because you're not out there earning anymore. Earners, and I'm speaking, Dustin, I'm speaking to the Congress people here, right? They are in the world where they're going to go do speaking gigs and have book deals and they're making money off of their income from Congress, their job. They have their health care paid for. Like, they're not feeling the crunch where they have a net worth that's flat that now have to take all of that capital that they've made that's already been taxed on and push it into risk assets. They're not quite there yet. I'm not saying they don't have their assets in risk assets. I'm saying that they're continually earning. And there's a difference there when you are an earner, how you view taxes.
Jay, because they're part of the revolving door and then they go work for the lobbying firm that was lobbying them or the large corporation in their district that they were doing all those favors for.
They're on the hand.
Shannon actually, yeah, for sure. Shannon asked the question. So what do we do about it? Amanda's on stage, and I know there's been a lot of conversations that we had early on with what feels like the reunion crew here from Bitcoin Clubhouse. Just about, I remember like when I met you, Amanda, for instance, Gary Gensler just got appointed. We just got some declaration from the OCC about banks being able to hold digital assets, right? BNY, Bank of New York Mellon was not part of the conversation. NYDIG wasn't part of the conversation. Tesla, there were all these things. And now we're starting to see, I think, one of the developments that I've seen, and you've been central to that, is we're actually starting to be a little bit more organized and with a lot of effort from you and a lot of others, putting in the ability to educate people who are really have a massive education gap. I've talked about this before. I have friends that are in various levels of state and the federal legislature, and I'm aghast at their understanding of this. Having said that, like, the infrastructure is developing, and I think the other half of this is like seeing more institutions come online that can ultimately sway the narrative in Washington in a more significant way, with more interest to protect and more marketing dollars and lobbying dollars to support really tactical efforts by what feels like just a decentralized group of cyber hornets going after Cynthia and crew to get them educated. I don't know if you want to chime in, because I do think the question Shannon raised is probably the more pertinent one. What do we do next?
Yeah, Shannon's been part of this too. Last week, we taught a staffer via Zoom, so anyone can do this, just about Bitcoin, and have addressed some of the FUD. We've done this with senators directly as well. Becca, Jimmy, myself, and a few others, Joe, have been working on C4. And so we're bringing that out into the world just to focus on education in DC, and then some grassroots efforts where it makes sense. I think a lot of it is just being naive and ignorance, but I think it's on us to take the steps to focus on teaching folks on the Hill and back home. I think where you live is just, and your local politicians are just as important as people in DC. So that's been exciting. I don't know. I would love to hear if any other Bitcoin groups had submitted a Toomey proposal. Senator Toomey had asked for a response on guidance around cryptocurrency legislation. And so we were able to submit that proposal Monday night. So now we're just hitting the ground running. CJ and Alex Gladstein are going to be talking to a group of, I think, senators and staffers, probably the end of in October. And then some of us are going to go out to DC in November and just set up a bunch of meetings and start building those relationships. Like, it takes time. I think it's really important to offer education before asking for specific attention to things so that they know that we're going to be around for years and not just come and go. I think that's really important throughout this whole process. But thanks, John.
Amanda, quick question. Do you think that it's more important to educate the incumbents or those on the Hill than it is to educate the actual constituency? Because I've always taken the approach that educating the constituency will make the people on the Hill get educated really fast, because that's what happens, right? If your constituency has a issue that they're going to want to vote on or that is really important to them, then that incumbent better figure it out really quick, or that next election, they're not going to make it, right? And I think we put a lot of effort into trying to educate the folks on the Hill, but I truthfully believe it's that old country thing when people say you can't teach an old dog new tricks. And I think that, to me, has shown forth more than anything. Like, I know Senator Warner, not Warren, but Senator Warner. I met him a long time ago, man. Like, these people have had a chance to learn about Bitcoin. They've had a chance to learn about what's going on in the cryptocurrency space. They've had no interest in it. Why have they had no interest? Because their constituency has no interest in it. And I'm just wondering, do you think that the efforts of doing that are in somewhat in vain if you don't have a lot of money behind it? Because that's how I always feel. Or do you feel like that there are some efforts that are actually chipping away at their ideologies and the things that they've believed for a long time?
Yeah, that's a good question. I guess we experimented with that on the infrastructure bill with so many people who called their senators, right? Like, we were blowing up the hill. Sorry, this is bad. I don't want to flag this. We were taking up the phone lines to an annoying point.
40,000
be careful
calls,
with your
right?
words. Yeah, I think, and those were just the ones we know about. I think there were probably more. And that's a great little, hey, we're here. But if we can't back that up with consistency and education, we're just going to be, that's a one-time trick. I think now you have to follow that up with, hey, we're the annoying ones that called you. We'd like to talk to your staff and teach you about this. That's the most important part. And I don't know how many people actually followed up and called and taught. And if we don't have that follow-up, it doesn't matter if we're...
They never called.
Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, but Jay left like a 45-minute long message.
But Jay, I guarantee they call back their biggest donor. Guarantee you.
That was not me.
Did you see what I'm saying? I guarantee.
But you know what, no, Lamar, to your point, I'm thinking about marijuana as an example of some kind of grassroots movement. I think it wasn't the politicians that came to us and said, hey, guys, you know what? You need marijuana. I think we should legalize marijuana.
Right.
What do you think? No, it was the people. It was such a demand that they had to respond to the constituencies. And so I think you're right on that. I don't know how you do that. That's a grassroots movement. I think what they're doing, going to the senators and lobbying them, I think you still have to do that. But I do think there needs to be a concerted effort towards getting people to be pushing on like you did before. That was fantastic. And when I'm reading that there's 40,000 calls, I did not hear that on Clubhouse, guys. I saw that on CNBC or some shit on the website, on CNBC article. So that's amazing. That was purely out of the Clubhouse crew that did that. So congratulations. Fantastic.
Yeah, congratulations on getting it. But here's my question. That's like that. Here's the thing, man. We've seen political efforts happen like this. Grassroots, people yelling, screaming. We getting a lot of people calling in, the whole nine. But the question is, what are the outcomes? Like, yes, we were annoying. Yes, we were on the phones. But what happened in that bill? What was the outcome of the vote? At the end of the day, no matter how many calls that you all made, like, that's the part, right? Like, I think that's the part that we sometimes miss, is that, yes, it feels good to do all of these things and go about it in the standard political way and the whole nine. But the truth is, just like what Jay said, we've talked about that before. With marijuana, it's like the people said, look, man, we want this to be legal. Like, and until the people really spoke up loud enough and were like, look, we'll vote you out if you don't make this legal, or they wind up getting to the point where it was on the actual ballot.
Yeah, it was extraordinarily positive. It was extraordinarily positive. I understand. You had a United States Senator on the floor of the Senate fighting for Bitcoin. At least one, Ted Cruz. You had other senators trying to fix the language and listening to reason. And because of an arcane parliamentary rule, they couldn't get it through because some other idiot wanted to get his priority passed. That's essentially what happened, right? So to make the notion that all that activism is so silly, Lamar, I'm sorry. I just completely disagree.
All right. I muted everyone. Okay, hold on. Lamar, please finish. And then I do want to hear Amanda's thoughts. Go ahead, Lamar.
Yeah, I literally was quiet after I asked Amanda the question. I let her respond. She was like, I think but Joe disagrees. But at the same time, Joe, the language that was put into those bills, regardless of what you're saying, some of that language was not great for Bitcoin. It wasn't great, period. Like, it literally wasn't great. Ted Cruz had the best option, period. It's like, we don't know enough about this. We shouldn't be out here putting this in bills.
That's not the point, though.
No, that is the point, because here's the thing. No, Jay, just listen. Let me land mine.
I'm listening.
The point is this, is because if you get the wrong institutions, the wrong people writing the bills and making these decisions within the bill, then even if we get something in there that says something about Bitcoin, if it is not the right thing, then all of a sudden we're fighting an uphill battle all over again. And that's what I'm saying. Like, you're really running, you're running in circles.
I agree.
You're literally running in circles if people are not putting the right things in. And these people don't have enough information.
Everybody agrees. We all agree. We all agree. 100%. But you should also celebrate that what Joe said is absolutely also true. They were literally, there's a guy, a senator, standing there fighting for Bitcoin. Never had that before.
Yeah, and
so
I think
did it go 100% favorably? No, it's a stepping stone. Like, It's inevitable. It's all inevitable. So
hold on, wait. Lamar, he's fighting. Wait, hold on. He's fighting for Bitcoin because many of the people on this stage put a ton of effort into getting him on board with that. Hold on. And I totally.
He's not in freaking New York, bro. He's in Texas.
Absolutely.
If he was in New York, he wouldn't be doing that. That's what I'm saying.
Hold on. I told Jay, I got this. Lamar, totally agree with you. But I think that it is also very important to acknowledge that this is a stochastic process, right? It is not something that is going to go from 1 to 100 instantaneously. We're always in a situation where we're doing 3 steps forward, 2 steps back, 5 steps forward, 2 steps back, 10 steps forward, 7 steps back. And that's what it takes. It takes the efforts of everyone, the plebs, and it takes grassroots efforts from the bottom up, constituents calling their representatives. And it also takes companies weighing in. It takes lobbyists. It takes organizations like the one that Amanda and Joe and Becca and Jimmy and others are part of to also, it's a multi-pronged attack. It takes all aspects. And again, it's always going to be this stochastic step forward, but we are moving forward, even if sometimes we lose ground in the short term. But Amanda, I do want to hear what you were going to say. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think a lot of context was missed on how to get a politician from zero to grandstanding on the floor about Bitcoin, right? That took a month of prep. That took relentless follow-up. So if we're going to do this on, pleb powered and do grassroots orange pilling like that, then we all have to step up, and you can't just take, they didn't call me back. Like, you have to email, you have to call, you have to try 10 different ways to get a hold of them sometimes. And so it's like, how relentless are you going to be? I'm not picking on you, Jay. I'm just saying, I hear this all the time, and I'm just like, because you have to be relentless. You have to be relentless.
Look, Jay, look, I did have you tattoo the message that was relevant on my back. And I think that's the level of commitment that we're talking about here. We took pictures, we sent it to the representatives in California.
On the small of your back.
Oh, yeah.
It was a tramp stamp is what you're trying to get at. It's all good.
Look, that's your word. It's not, that doesn't align with my culture, but yes, we call it a tramp stamp, but with an H in there. So it's a different word.
This is the crew.
I need to validate Lamar's thoughts.
Lamar, go ahead.
I know I love Amanda because that's my girl. That's my people's. Anyway, Amanda, but here's my question. I have a question to you. Would you say that in the political realm, matter of fact, I was talking to, what's my man's name? Regulatory Jason. And he was telling me, like, if I put $500, if you my dude too, bro, but I'm saying if you put $500 on, like, basically donate $500, you're far more likely to get a meeting with your congressperson. Like, he was telling me that, like, he was explaining that to me one time. But Amanda, do you think that if Bitcoiners put their money together, that we would have a far better influential stick? We have a far better carrot, so to speak, to get people like Ted Cruz to get on the floor. If we had, I know that. That's what I'm saying.
Well, you'd have to follow through.
Aren't you heading out there, guys, for the money?
There are like many approaches that are going on right now. There are basically three entities. One's a C4, one's a C6, one's a C3. So there are 3 Bitcoin specific groups that are collaborating to get this done. And probably 2 super PACs will come out of it because you have a limit on how much you can donate to a campaign. So yes, Lamar, I think that's where the super PAC thing comes in. But we also want to be really wise with where you spend those resources, right? Some are just a lost cause. So we've been running, and this is where it would be amazing to have help from Pleb. So feel free to DM me or Becca or Jimmy. We'd love help from you because we're going to start focusing on data and targeting. So there's a lot that you can do if you understand who to target. The problem is, like, if someone's won, let's say I'll just go with Dems because they're easier to pick on because they aren't as up to speed on Bitcoin. Let's say they won their area by a landslide. That's probably not someone we want to target. But what we want to target are people where they are in a tight race or historically have been in a tight race, and where they don't always vote with party line, like they use their own brain a little bit. So we've actually made a tier system for probably 70 Democrats on the House side and rank them. So we have 5 tiers, and we should probably be targeting the first 3 tiers pretty heavily. And then some people aren't going to be running for election again. So we need to figure out, how do we get to those candidates before they're actually running and teaching them? And I think that's huge. Like, it's really easy if there's a seat opening to get to those candidates before they're officially on the docket. So I think that, yeah, sometimes money does speak, but also so do, companies that are employing people, like Bitcoin miners are employing a lot of people across this country. You have like financial services companies that have just raised Series A's, for example, Unchained Capital, right? So those are the companies that I think could have influence in these conversations. But also, if you're just living in your district and there's negative policy coming down the pipeline, you probably want staffers to understand where you're coming from and teach them before you say, hey, I don't want you to go after my IRA, or I don't want you to add these taxes, or this is a backdoor on privacy. So it's really about building like these kind of long-term relationships, and it's a lot of work. So I think people can do it. I think we can do it. It's just going for it. So that's what we're trying to help with too, is some of that. So that's why folks like Shannon and some others from Colorado, we've been experimenting, because I grew up there. But there's so much that can be done on the local level and then on the federal level.
Becca, you were going to jump in for a second. Going once. Going twice.
Sorry, I'd stepped away from the phone. No, I think Amanda covered it great. And I think there will be a lot of opportunity for people to get involved according to their interests and their skills. And I think those needs and opportunities.
He asked me to come on and talk about it a little bit. I don't want to reintroduce the topic yet. I think it's important that we talk about the letter from Janet and how we organize. But I would say that one of the things that also has to happen for us to get our way, and I know that sounds a really like simple semantic delivery of our way, but yeah, like getting this thing to 10 trillion or 100 trillion is going to change the way that Bitcoin is viewed. Is going to change the sharpness of its tool, and I think it enhances the game theory that we all know is built into the protocol. But Tina hit on this a little bit ago, and I think it's going to take further institutional adoption to get the lobbying power in Washington, much like other massive and influential lobbies. We'll map those strategies out from there. And I think the letter that Michael sent in particular is really important for a lot of institutions. I'll leave that there for now in terms of other steps that I think need to take place for us to have more of a voice in Washington.
Probably the biggest reason the NRA is effective is not just because they spend money, but because they have a hardcore base of voters who vote on that issue. So right. Bitcoiners need to become a hardcore base of voters, and we will become a huge base of voters.
Tina, that's true. That's absolutely true. But 95% of their money comes from 4 gun manufacturers. And I think
they have a lot of interest. You have
that's my point. Those are both. That's exactly the point.
But the bigger problem is that there are a lot of Bitcoiners who think politics doesn't scale, doesn't matter. I'll tell you all the answers I've heard in the last 3 years from people. And it's like herding cats. They think shit doesn't matter. Bitcoin may be anti-fragile, but when an IRS agent is crawling up your ass and out your nose, you trust me, you're fragile. I promise you, you are freaking fragile.
I'm gonna bring this back around though, because this is what Bitcoin Tina just said. The reason why the NRA has an incredible amount of political power is because they have an incredible base of voters. You got to ask yourself, who are those base of voters? That base of voters are people who hold guns. That's a lot of people holding guns. And that's why I'm saying it's going to come back around to this. What we have to do is get more people holding Bitcoin. Because the more people that hold Bitcoin and understand what Bitcoin is doing for them, the larger the base of voters becomes. And so regardless of what politician is there, if their constituency is holding Bitcoin, they're going to have some questions to answer when it comes to the town halls and the little pop-ups and everything that these politicians do within their states. So I think that's what it is. Like, we got to do both, but I truthfully believe like we still have to run the race of letting people know about Bitcoin, why it's better, how it gives people freedom, and the whole nine. And I think that's going to be the foundation for which Amanda and Becca kill it. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. And Donna here. And the other thing I would say is that, I was out with some women trying to get them to think about Bitcoin. I think the other thing is, and I'm loath sometimes to compare to the NRA, but they have a single point message. They have a message that's never changing. And so Bitcoin, what we can do what Becca and Amanda, myself, Jimmy, others are doing, is get that message honed to the politicians. And then when the ownership of Bitcoin is spread much more diversely, they'll all have that same message. And so the message and the ownership will be widespread, and the political impact will be much greater. And that's why it's very important to have a crisp message about Bitcoin to the politicians, and not to say that we shouldn't sometimes go with other groups, because they'll need that force on one or two issues that impact everybody. But ours is an independent voice that is large and honed in Washington.
So, Donna and everybody, let me ask a question back to the group. How do we do that effectively? How do we get this uniform block of Bitcoin voters when we know Bitcoin is supposed to be available to everyone? It's people all over the spectrum. How do we both, to Lamar's point, really focus on getting Bitcoin into the hands of the most people possible? Because that's the end game and that's what wins in the end. But how do we encourage that adoption broadly and quickly while still creating cohesion in this voting bloc, which ultimately ends up encouraging tribalism?
We can clone Lamar, and I think it has to be small groups and small communities, little lessons on how you get it, how you buy it, how you hold it, why it's powerful in everywhere, in little community groups, on mothers talking on the playground. And it's a grassroots effort.
I got an idea. What if we just ran Clubhouse and Twitter Spaces rooms 24 hours a day, just talking about Bitcoin? Would that be an effective?
Don't be ridiculous. No one would be willing to commit that much time for free to education. That's just an insane proposition.
Who would do that? Like, that's crazy. And to be honest, I think that has actually helped a lot, though, because look at PlebNet.
100%.
It's so like, look at PlebNet, look at the Black Bitcoin billionaires. We have 120.
Hey, don't let me not agree with you. Stop trying to not let me agree with you.
John, please.
Okay, can I say something?
Yes, Jimmy, go for it.
So I think the biggest and most obvious way in which you get a lot of people involved is number go up. That is how you get more people in. Because every time number goes up, there's like way more people that come in. This latest round, I think we're estimating something like 40 million people in the US. I'm not sure. I've heard estimates between like 10 and 40 million.
40.
That own Bitcoin. That's a lot of freaking people. And imagine that's bullshit. The nice thing is time is on our side. And I think a lot of these politicians come to us, not the other way around. And they're going to be like, okay, we know you guys have money. What can we do for you? I'm expecting that in this next bull market, where a lot of people come seeking us out and not the other way around, which is, I think, going to be a lot better, because we are going to get a lot more adoption. That's how, and it's nice because we're on the winning side and we're going to be regardless.
Jimmy, I'd argue you're right, even if you haven't realized it already. But that's what Ted Cruz did. So think about the politics of this, just the politics, okay? Forget all of the implications of the tax bill, etc. But what Ted Cruz did, he's likely to run for the presidency in 2024. And what he may have just did is tried to get a first mover advantage in a community that he thinks is likely to be a lot wealthier and a lot more powerful and a lot more influential.
Oh, dude.
I know some of the conversations you've had, so I shouldn't say that I don't fully know, but some of the people that were in the conversation with you are calling me.
Jimmy,
all joking aside, but tell me some more thoughts. But I think that was
John, wait, let me finish.
The concept. No, I think he was, and I'll let him jump back in here. Jimmy, go by all means.
Yeah, I basically I made all the arguments that I could to get Ted on our side, and I think he heard them, and I think he's very convinced. Let's just put it that way. If you want to know exactly the arguments I gave him, I don't know, DM me or something, or I'll be on Clubhouse later. I just don't want to say it.
It's all good,
Jimmy,
but I think that it worked is what I mean to say. And I think it's been incredibly effective because the thing is, he has nothing to lose by going up there. No one's going to remember in 4 years, anybody that wasn't going to vote for him already isn't going to remember, remember when Ted Cruz went up during the infrastructure bill and spoke up to propose an amendment in committee. That cost him nothing.
I disagree.
But he signaled. I think it signaled to him. I shouldn't say take it back. I don't want to say it cost him nothing, but I think the calculation is that he signaled to a lot of people that are going to have a lot of power and money, and he did it before any other major candidate likely for the 2024 election did. So I don't want to pretend like it was a zero risk piece, but generally, I think he knows that it helped them more than it hurt him. And I gather the conversations Jimmy, Amanda, CJ, and others had with them probably helped to illuminate that. But he made the first move.
John, I regret a little bit. I think it just happened with timing that he was voting that day. I am genuinely concerned that this becomes a single, a one-party issue, or Republicans take hold of this. I think it's really important that this is a bipartisan issue. And because then we're just swaying back and forth on a pendulum, depending on who's in power. And if we can take the Lummis approach and take the bipartisan approach, I think we'll fare much better jumping on
100% agree
on this. So that's just and also, why is he running for president? He wasn't even born in the US. It's just a show for this guy. And I appreciate what he did. And I know a lot of people are working hard. But at the same time, it's really in such a divided country right now to try to keep this bipartisan and let the game theory on the left wants this more than right, or right wants this more than left, versus just honing in on this being a Republican only issue. That's what I'm concerned about.
Yeah, but I think
and I belong to no political party, by the way.
The hit piece, right? Did you see the hit piece? The alt-right, Bitcoin is for the alt-right, for them to get around some stuff. Come on, bro.
Yeah, and that's why crazy. I think when we talk about trying to be like the NRA, let's be more like AARP. They're even more terrifying on the Hill. They're bipartisan in their support. People pay a membership fee, 40 million members. We have 46 million Bitcoiners in the US. So I try to point us in the direction of trying to draw more similarities between AARP, because we're already getting painted in that corner.
Amanda, right. Great.
Yeah, Amanda, I agree with that completely. I would even argue to say that to maybe summarize that, and this is something I've argued and get beat up for all the time. Bitcoin is no doubt political, but in my mind, it is not a partisan. Both parties hit the print button and have been hitting the print button. Both parties have had power in different forms for the last 50 years since we got off it. In fact, to the point of just the Republican point that you brought up, just because Ted Cruz is Republican, not only we had a Republican president when we got off the gold standard, right? There's all types of this stuff that I totally agree. It's no doubt political. The game theory is certainly political, but you're right that this would be so much more effective, and it's probably going to be really difficult in 2021, 2022 American politics to cultivate a nonpartisan piece. But I think the AARP example is a great one, and certainly applaud your perspective and try to focus that in is awesome.
Plus, I think people with AARP cards get discounts on Captain D's, like the seafood place. So,
my man,
here's the problem with this partisan thing, because the Republicans are the ones that are actually more open to it, and the Democrats are the ones that are demonizing it. You have Warren saying stupid shit, and you have people like AOC, that that's clear, that are clearly like leaning in that direction of vilifying anybody that disagrees. So
I agree with that, Jimmy. But but why would we just lean back and encourage that polarization down that road? Like, I agree with everything you just said. I think right now the narrative is going in a very hardcore direction that aligns with party lines. And it's, to me, it's like really upsetting, because to me, Bitcoin is changing the distribution of wealth. And I think that's something that, taking away the power from the elite and giving it to the working person, that's how the left view themselves, whether it's how they view them or not, it's how they view themselves. And I think it's just an affront to Bitcoin that they are not hearing, that they don't understand that Bitcoin is about justice and about equality and about fairness, right? These are messages that are complementary to them. And I think when you build up the right as the Bitcoin hero and you strengthen that narrative that the right is the friend of Bitcoin, they're not our friend.
Well, Jimmy, two quick examples though, right? Ro Khanna, who I didn't know who he was, literally gave a really I didn't even know who he was until he made this post. But Ro Khanna made a really eloquent argument for defending energy use for Bitcoin, saying that it's not a bad use for energy, that he was basically fighting the FUD. And then the other thing I would point to, by the way, I totally agree with the trend line that you're talking about. And if you were to stack them up, but remember, it was Richard Selby from Alabama, a Republican senator, that basically shot down the amendment that we were looking to have. So I just don't think it's that clear.
Can I finish my thought? Because the thing is, right now, the Democrats are in power. And that's my point. They're not going to listen when they have power. They're going to listen when they're desperate. And that's where the Republicans are right now. They know that they have an opportunity and that they're going to need people like us. And the thing is, it's okay to seem a little partisan at certain points, because the pendulum does swing. And we essentially, it's going, Republicans are at some point, I think, will be in power, and then the Democrats will come calling. And that's when you say, okay, here are all the reasons why you should support this and why you should condemn this. And it's that which I think a lot of the really effective lobbying groups do, which is just, okay, we're always going to back the winner.
Contribute to both sides.
Yeah. And this is like the fine art that we have to figure out how to play, which I'm not so sure that, like, yeah, it's not obvious what that path is, because I don't know. I suck at politics. But
no, Jimmy, I think you're not wrong. I don't think you're wrong about that at all. And I think you're right. Like, they back both horses. If you look at like most large, like banking companies are donating to both the district. Like, they're maxing out on both. Like, energy companies are doing it in different ways. Like, all types of lobbying organizations will back both horses, and then they just donate to the person that they think that's going to win at the end and double down on them. But for the most part, you're right. I would just say, and I think the strategy of finding the person or the party that needs you more is certainly not something I would disagree with or endorse. I don't know. I'm not the lobbyist in the room either. I do think it's important, though, that I think it is important to be partisan. I actually predict one day we'll all be 100% partisan, because Bitcoin will be the party. It'll be the single issue. Now, how we traverse from here to there, I think, is more akin to how you just laid it out. But I do think, like, the more macro point that I think Amanda and Becca are saying, I think is still important to be able to make this a nonpartisan issue. Like, the AARP is such a great example, or that's why, like, Medicare and Social Security cuts are like the third rail of politics. Like, it's like the fastest way to lose your seat, no matter how long you've been there. So I just think the more macro point of being able to attract both sides and neutralize them and not make it like an abortion issue or a gun rights issue or just any of the other things that we wind up being divided about, which is going to be hard. I don't even know how to do it, but I do think that goal is noble.
So can I offer some analysis here? Like, the thing is,
just because he hasn't
those people vote, and most younger people who are
Tina.
But he's right. Old people vote.
I love you, Tina. It's a great point. I do want to hear Jimmy's thoughts, though.
Yeah. All right. Well, so what I was going to say is that the way you get that kind of loyalty from both parties is that you punish them when they go against you, right? And that's essentially what AARP, even the gun lobby, and everybody else that does effective lobbying, that's what they do, is they punish the people that go against you. So right now, you have people like Warren and Sherman that are going against us, and they both happen to be Democrats. if you punish them, guess what? The next Democrats are going to be a lot nicer, and they're going to start being more conciliatory towards you. The way to, I think, get the Democrats on our side is to punish the bad ones, not necessarily woo everybody. Although, hey, I would love to see Erica Rhodes beat Brad Sherman. I think that would be amazing. Like punishing those people that are against you and like purging them from the party through whatever you're able to do. That's ultimately, I think, how you're going to get them to come around. And once you show your strength, they're like, okay, maybe we should be aligned with them. And I think this is what AARP plays masterfully. Anytime anyone in either party talks about Social Security reform or Medicare or something like that, they punish them if they speak out against it, and it's perceived as bad.
Badass.
Can I just add one thing on that? Is I thought that the conversations that we've had, let's say with a couple of, we'll just make it, more widespread with a couple of the legislative people where they met you, Jimmy, and they met CJ, and those people became real people. They were not Bitcoin, which they didn't even know what Bitcoin was. These were their constituents that had businesses, that had opinions, that had kids, all of a sudden there was a face to Bitcoin, which was a human face to Bitcoin. And I think that's very important in AARP, that there's a certain kind of a person. There's an older person. And all of the legislative persons know what that person is. They have a grandmother, they have a grandfather. And so the gun people also have an image. We are just building ours. So we need to introduce ourselves to these legislators, whether they be Democrats, Republicans, it doesn't really matter, to see that we're their constituents that have businesses, that are professors, that are doing all these kinds of interesting things with families and schools, and we have Bitcoin. That's our most important issue, notwithstanding that the health of our families. And that is also tied up into Bitcoin because it gives it the potential for economics. So I think that once they have an identity, they understand that there are people behind this, they feel more comfortable to be an advocate for it because it's not understandable to them. These are their constituents talking to them. I do think that's important.
I know what we can do. It just hit me with what Donna just said. Yes, invite politicians to Bitcoin meetup.
Yes. Can I tell you something I did once?
All over the country. Invite politicians to Bitcoin meetups.
Go ahead, Amanda.
Tina is 100% right. When they meet us in person, all those fears, those uncertainties, all that FUD in the media just is noise, and they can focus on the signal of the person right in front of them teaching them. And I think that is huge. Like, I want what I think is the most powerful persona that they can come away with is Bitcoiners are innovators that are going to allow America to compete at the global level, because right now we're losing that foothold.
Interesting. You're saying that basically it's easy for politicians to get lost in the rhetoric, but if you put a person in front of them, a potential constituent, that they can see their face, understand their excitement, it transcends the specific issue, and they can see that the person is genuine and be convinced.
Yeah, and it's going towards building those relationships, right? I think that's the most important thing. So many times people just come to politicians when they have a problem or when they want something. But if you can take a different approach and be a resource and kind of show them a different view, I think that's extremely powerful. Tina's right.
Can I jump on that point exactly?
They look for places. They look for places to connect with constituents.
Definitely.
And natural thing. These meetups take place organically, and they're going to be in Congress people's districts. It can be incredibly effective.
Okay, so I wanted to talk exactly about that. I also live in Wyoming, and as you said, in addition to Cynthia Lummis, we have possibly one of the worst people in the House, and that is Liz Cheney for Bitcoin. Not specifically, but privately, she's extremely against it. But that aside, these people of Wyoming definitely do not like her, and there is going to be a pretty big battle about it. So I have been working very closely with, at least prior to Harriet Hageman becoming tapped by Donald Trump, the previous frontrunner, Anthony Bouchard, who, when I moved here, he was about as anti-Bitcoin as you could get. In fact, the local conservatives were trying to undo or were thinking about trying to undo all of the Bitcoin laws that were passed here in Wyoming. And I met them at a political event, and I said, actually, guys, I'm a Bitcoiner. Let me talk to you. And they had me and Caitlin Long there for 2.5 hours. 50 people came in the room, including Anthony Bouchard, thinking that Bitcoin was the devil. And by the end, 30 of them were asking how to buy it. And now Anthony Bouchard is about as close to almost being a Bitcoiner as I think he could be without actually being there yet. But he's definitely off the mark of disliking it. So yes, talking to these people one-on-one, getting them talking to their constituents, educating people, it's a big piece of leverage that people don't expect.
Yeah, find a couple people and just start trying to contact them, and where you get a little traction, just keep moving with that traction. If anyone wants to talk about this or reach out, I have to run to a dinner meeting, but feel free to message me here, because I think this is what folks are doing at the grassroots level. It adds up. Find the candidates that are coming in to replace others and start teaching them before they're a big deal.
Love it.
Bitcoiners, I am so excited to tell you about the Bitcoin 2022 conference. You guys, Bitcoin 2021 was absolutely a smash hit success. It was over 13,000 Bitcoiners coming together, breaking the barriers on who can come together and celebrate freedom, celebrate Bitcoin, and the energy was absolutely electric. Unfortunately, it was just oversubscribed. There's just people flowing out everywhere. And this year we are making the conference bigger and better. We are moving over to the Miami Beach Convention Center, and we are going to be throwing a massive 4-day festival for Bitcoin, celebrating Bitcoin, bringing together the greatest minds in Bitcoin and the greatest businesses in Bitcoin. And lastly, the culture of Bitcoin all together. We have a 4-day extravaganza planned for you guys for Bitcoin 2022. Day one is going to be Industry Day. It is a day where you can buy a special ticket in order to just mingle and make business deals happen. Day 2 and 3 is going to be a full-blown Bitcoin conference. This is our main conference. This is going to be on April 7th and 8th. And then lastly, we have the Sound Music Festival, Day 4. Imagine going to Coachella, but for Bitcoin. There's going to be very few talks. It's going to be all about the culture of Bitcoin. It's going to be all about hanging with your fellow plebs. It is going to be an absolutely amazing time. There's going to be Bitcoin musicians, Bitcoin artists, and all your favorite Bitcoiners, and just an amazing environment to party and just see it all, soak it all in, and to get people to realize that a Bitcoin world, a world filled with Bitcoin people doing Bitcoin things, is the world that they want to live in. That's what Bitcoin 2022 is all about. That is what the Bitcoin conference is all about. That's what Bitcoin Magazine is all about. So it is going to be a celebration of Bitcoin, the Bitcoiners, and this amazing movement that is going to make the world a better place. Go to b.tc/conference, learn more about the Bitcoin conference, learn more about all the amazing things that are happening in Miami around the Bitcoin conference, and buy your tickets. And guess what? If you buy your tickets with Bitcoin, you save $100 on all the tickets and $1,000 on the whale pass. So if you want the VIP pass, the big kahuna, if you buy with Bitcoin, you save $1,000. That's a lot of sats. So go and do it right now today. Don't wait. Prices are only going up. This is going to be a can't miss event. Bitcoiners, I want to tell you about the Deep Dive. The Deep Dive is Bitcoin Magazine's premium market intelligence newsletter. This is a no fluff, hard-hitting, incredible newsletter going deep into the market, helping you understand what's happening with derivatives, what's happening on chain, what's happening in macro, what's happening with the narrative, and what's happening with the tech. My man, Dylan LeClaire, is an absolute savant. He is making his name known in the Bitcoin community, getting shout outs left and right, getting on podcasts left and right. And him and his team are bringing you everything that you need to know about Bitcoin. You don't even have to be on Bitcoin Twitter. You can ignore every other newsletter. This is the newsletter to rule them all. Go over to members.bitcoinmagazine.com. Sign up today. And if you use promo code MACRO, you get a full month for free. You have nothing to lose. What are you waiting for? Sign up. See the incredible work that Dylan and his team are putting out. And if you don't like it, just unsubscribe. You don't pay a dime. But if you do, you know, it's going to be well worth the sats in investment in understanding Bitcoin and gaining the confidence to continue to invest in Bitcoin and making the right moves around Bitcoin, and it's going to be well worth every single Satoshi. Again, can't recommend it enough. That is members.bitcoinmagazine.com, promo code macro. Do it today.
Okay, I do want to acknowledge we're at about 2 hours now, and I really appreciate everyone who's jumped up on stage and who has joined this conversation. This has been amazing. This has been recorded and will be released on the Bitcoin Spaces Live podcast, which you can search for in whatever thing you want. You can also find it on YouTube under the Bitcoin Magazine channel. But just want to give, if anybody needs to jump out, you absolutely can. But let's keep going for those who want to stick around. I can go for another half an hour or so, and we'll call it. Totally. How y'all feeling? You want to keep going?
Yeah, sure. I don't know. There's something about politics where, like, we're at the stage where the sort of like margins of politicians are interested, but we're soon going to get to the mainstream ones. And I think we just have to be patient, because I really do think they're going to come to us. And yeah, we need to be prepared when they do. But yeah, that's how it is in every bull market, is that you have like people from all over the place coming in, contacting you, right? You get like your third grade best friend like calling you and saying, hey, should I buy this thing? That sort of thing. Same thing. I think it's going to happen at the politician level. They're going to be like, okay, I need to really find out more about this thing. What am I going to do? But we're at the edges right now. The politicians that we're getting to talk to, they're not like top tier ones, right? Like we're not getting to talk to the president or the Speaker of the House yet. It's people like Ted Cruz, who lost the primary. He's on the edges of the Republican Party, or Erica Rhodes, who's like running against like a 20-year incumbent. That's what happens. We're at the edges right now, but we reward some of these people at the edges that are helping us, and we punish some of the people that are more near to the center of power that are against us. Soon we're going to be at the center. I think that's inevitable, and that's my thought on it.
Yeah, Jimmy, I don't disagree. I think the playbook you lay out is less AARP almost to a certain extent. It's more APAC. APAC is one of the most effective lobbying institutions. Like, they'll get both candidates to come up to, it's the Alliance for Israeli PAC, I think, is what it stands for, or American Israeli PAC. I don't know. It's a very powerful lobby for Jewish American causes, and maybe for Jewish causes overseas too. I'm not really sure, but it's the one place where you'll get both parties and both presidential candidates to go to the conference and like basically say, I support Israel. I do envision a day where it's going to be like that. You can't go against certain mainstream issues, whether it's like the AARP example with Medicare and Social Security becoming just such a death wish for a politician, or someone coming out and saying, we don't stand with Israel. Like, that's a death wish for a politician. And I think the structure, the infrastructure that's taken place over the last 12 months for me is been pretty significant. Yeah, I'm familiar that APAC is pro-Israel. Just I'm getting a bunch of DMs, so I don't know if I misspoke. But yeah, but the idea is that they're real effective. And if you come out against those particular issues that they don't go and necessarily just support the politicians that support them, because most everybody does at this point. They have enough power. When you step out of line, they basically fund your primary opponent, fund the other candidate, take out really large dollar media campaign ads in your district, etc. I think that strategy you laid out is probably one that is going to behoove us not to pursue. It's probably going to be where game theory actually leads us. So yeah, I don't disagree with it at all. I also just think that there is some tangential consideration of like our interests that are tied to squares and MicroStrategies, not MicroStrategies, but taking those types of powerhouses that are able to write the letter that, for instance, I put up in the tweet above to get accounting changes that are really practically needed, not just why changing laws or federal legislature. There's some of the things that need to go to the SEC and some of the things that need to go to FASB, and like getting like really marginal changes that have really helped the adoption of Bitcoin is also part of the formula.
Donna, you've been quiet for a while. You have any thoughts?
I thought I was very talkative before, and Tina agreed with me, so that makes me twice as talkative.
Fair enough. I apologize. I crave your indulgence.
No.
I am
sorry.
So sorry that I have...
But not my people. We're different people. No, I think it's great that the people that the Bitcoin crowd has.
Who's the
Bitcoin crowd has? That was Jay. That's the same people, I think. So the Bitcoin crowd has come around to have a conversation and to have a strategy and to be willing to participate and understand how important it is to get the regulators at least calmed down and educated and stuff like that. Even though Bitcoin will be Bitcoin, we'd like to be there a little bit with greater grace and flexibility than they could put in our path as some really big boulders. I think any discussion we have is fantastic. And I applaud everyone for doing it, engaging, and coming with an open mind.
Corey.
Yeah, the one thing I would point out is that I know a lot of people here do not like Ted Cruz or just are very turned off by him. And I get it. There's some certain things in which you might not like him, or maybe the way he's portrayed in the media or whatever. But regardless, you have to like that what he's doing for Bitcoin is a good thing. And he's our dependent right now. Now, is he going to be president? Probably not. But if he does, would that be a terrible thing for Bitcoin? I don't know. Like there are a lot worse scenarios than that. So I support the fact that he supports it. That's all I'm saying. It's don't just automatically say, oh, he's too partisan and let's dismiss him, or we need to get somebody on the other side because I don't like this guy and he's toxic or whatever. Give the guy a chance. Let him prove his loyalty to us. You know what I mean?
Corey, Terrence, welcome to the stage. Corey, do you have any thoughts?
I support Bitcoin freedom over government servitude.
That's good. That's good. You've passed the test. If you'd answered incorrectly, we would have gulagged you.
I have no doubt.
Thank you for the controversial statement, Terrence. We appreciate that.
I believe in unpopular opinions to engagement farm.
God damn it. Try again, but watch yourself, counselor. Next time I'm gulagging you. Corey.
I think there's something to keep in mind, though, about adoption of like this by politicians. Like the reality is like they're not going to be Bitcoin maximalists in my mind because the politics don't allow for that. A lot of jobs that they'll try to quote, quote, bring to their district or their state or whatever their jurisdiction is, it's going to be a bunch of VC money pumped into blockchain bullshit that like will represent jobs that they can claim. And that's good politics. And so they're going to say Bitcoin is great. And they're going to say, oh, there's all these other things too. And so just be ready for that too. They're going to be shitcoiners.
Yeah, and that's the thing I'm much more concerned about than no coiners that are trying to ban everything. It's the altcoins that like, and there's such an easy path to, we make it an innovation argument, then it's, then we should allow all these altcoins to thrive too. We have to make sure we can thread this needle and make sure that they're not no coiners, but they're also not altcoiners. You know what I mean?
I think Senator Loomis has done a very good job at that. And I would say that she has supported the state and she has been an advocate for Bitcoin in Congress, and they have good Bitcoin mining laws there, and they do hope to bring business around Bitcoin to the state and also the custody thereof.
In fairness to Cynthia, her son-in-law works at Unchained. Like she gets it probably better than most, but politicians are politicians, man. And we're going to see like the acceptance of what I just laid out, or at least I predict that. There's going to be too much money. I'd argue even Coin Center is like, they're not a Bitcoin lobbying organization. Like I would probably get most of their money from shitcoin VC.
They just raised $3 million using an NFT.
Wait, sorry, who did?
Coin Center. Coin Center raised like $3 million selling some NFT or something.
Yeah, which is insane and problematic.
Kind of.
What was the valuation? I'm dropping a Ted Cruz NFT tomorrow.
Yeah, that's literally why I think it's problematic. Like it's like when I saw that, yeah.
What is the reference to Ted Cruz? Is that part of it?
No, nothing with Ted Cruz. But it was Coin Center, right, Jimmy?
Yeah, it was Coin Center.
Yeah, they minted, as I understand it, they partnered with some artists who minted some ETH-based NFT and then agreed to donate the proceeds or something like that. But at the end of the day, they ended up with a crowdfunded $5 million. And when I read it, like, first my mind was blown because it just as a marketer or whatever, like that's such an interesting thing. But then like the way that can change the world of almost like political donations and fundraising and open it up to abuse or promise of different things. Yeah, I don't know. I think it could actually be the first of many such things for political organizations to raise money.
Hey, P, this has been a fun space.
Would that be against the law if Ted Cruz...
Wait, hold on.
No, what was against the law is you not letting me say bye to P. That was
and then I was like, I was thinking and I didn't even hear you talking. I ain't gonna lie to you, John. I'm sorry about that, bro. I was like, can you really raise money for Ted Cruz with an NFT?
Pete, this has been a great space, man. Lamar, I love seeing all these faces. I know I haven't hung out with a bunch of you guys on Clubhouse and stuff, so it's been a fun little reunion here. We can talk a little bit about Michael Saylor and some of these more institutional adoptions another night, or at least some of these challenges. I don't envision them going away in the near future. I posted the letter from Michael Saylor in the nest above about FASB accounting changes and the indefinite or the intangible accounting kind of issues. To the extent that people have questions, happy to follow up. But I'm getting a bunch of DMs about like tax and accounting advice, and I'm not a tax lawyer or an accountant anymore. I'm sorry.
Well, not
so
for
please,
them, just for me.
You're out of the net worth profile that even when I once worked in public accounting. But anywho, your tolerable error is probably like $80 million on your audit. But all joking to another end, I'm not here to like I'm not an accountant. That's not my business. Please stop DMing me about accounting question. But P, man, fun time, man. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining, and apologies. Originally, this was supposed to be half the stuff.
No, I'm glad we did it.
And then
we can do it another day.
Yeah, we'll definitely do it another day. John has a bunch to say about the challenges and strategies that need to be employed around acquiring Bitcoin as large institutions. Yeah, let's definitely have that conversation another time, John. Thank you.
All right, for sure, man. Good times, guys. See ya.
Peace.
Man, I ain't see MVK in these streets.
Oh, yeah. He's been up here, man. MVK, what you got?
Oh, I got nothing. I just joined in. I wasn't sure what was going on, so I was just remaining quiet.
Yeah, how many boars have you hunted from horseback with knives today?
None. There are no boars in the current location, but there were squirrels that had to be dealt with.
That was...
Do you eat squirrel brains?
See, if I see MVK, I really need CJ in the same room so I could see them like doing the accents against each other.
MVK versus Bizarro MVK.
Yeah, let's get CJ here. By the way, I now make a fee. There's a licensing fee involved. Every time CJ makes an impression of me, I get a cut. So I support that.
So you have your NFT of, I got you. I got a question for you.
No. Questions are scarce. NFTs are not scarce.
Oh, man.
It takes a great deal of skill for an impression, not for an NFT. Is that what you're saying?
Do you do all of this in Crocs, though? That's my only question, MBK.
Depending on the weather, yes.
Got you. So you hunt squirrels and boars and license out your voice impression in Crocs. Now, this is not a commercial for Crocs, by the way.
No, listen, I only have...
These negatives cancel each other out.
I used to be a flip-flops guy because I grew up in Brazil. But now, I either do barefoot, Crocs, or Blundstones. That's it. That's all I have.
Did you say Bloodstones? Like
no,
conflict diamonds?
Bloodstones. However you call those boots.
Yeah, conflict diamonds. That's fucked up, man. I know you got a business to run and you're producing some of the best hardware wallets in the market, but yeah, diamonds that are mined by orphans and by diamonds Bitcoin.
Pete, we used child labor just because the parts are very small to solder on the devices, so that we need little hands.
That's what I'm talking about. Look, yeah. I've been petitioning to the Bitcoin Mining Council for months that we should be employing orphans because their hands are smaller and they can shovel the coal into the steam engines that power the miners way, way faster. But I am told that I'm an insane person and also that I should not waste anyone's time. So I'm going to do it on my own and set these disadvantaged youths free. But moving on, CK, I see you're up on the stage. What you got, man? Silence.
I don't think he's paying attention, I think he's
counting his Bitcoin conference money.
I think it's called what is it?
Wait,
I did. I said I was talking about mining Bitcoins with orphans because they can shovel the coal into the steam boilers.
I stepped away for a second to wash my hands, and that's when you caught me. But yeah, honestly, it's a great strategy. I heard they have a lot of orphans in Tennessee. We can check that out and see if we can put together an op.
Yeah, and just to be clear, for every block that is mined, each orphan gets 10 Bitcoin. So we're actually losing.
This really is a reunion, huh?
That is totally an orphan chain.
Yeah. And look, we're here to empower the disadvantaged. And if we have to lose a massive amount of Bitcoin on each block reward, we're here for it. That's the commitment that we have to this space.
Are you recycling the orphans after?
That's a separate conversation. We can talk afterwards. NVK.
Hey, NVK, did you hear what happened about the safety deposit boxes? I heard they stole everything except for these two calculators. And
that's awesome. I hope they left the code card. Seriously, that's why never leave your seeds on safe deposit box unless they are like split or shamir or something.
All right, so I do want to bring us back around, though. All joking aside, we're not mining with orphans. That'd be fucked up. We're all good Bitcoiners. NVK, I am curious. We've been talking about this conversation initially got kicked off around the claims that Janet Yellen made yesterday and around the article that the White House published 2 days back about the idea of they just tried to slip in the claim that unrealized capital gains were income.
Yeah, so this is fascinating because, and I think it has a little bit of a stench from either the IMF or the World Economic Forum, because I'd say 6 months to a year ago, the Liberal government used some armed organization here in Canada to run what's called a balloon trial. So they just released a study pretending that it was just a study, but really just testing the politics around doing unrealized cap gains on homes in Canada. And people lost their shit. I think this is extremely unlikely to happen. And because it's like absurdly hard to deal with this, it becomes selective enforcement, which governments love, but it'd totally be a legal shit show. And then there is an upside to it. You also have unrealized losses, which you can do adjusting in your accounting.
But wait, are you talking about Canada or the US?
No, in the US or Canada, we have very similar tax codes. So it could get funny. If they do this, we're all going to change our year ends to whatever is the time of the year that Bitcoin dips most commonly. We might even try to trigger Bitcoin to go to shit that month of the year so we can all post some losses. And they might actually owe us taxes back.
So wait, I don't think it's going to work that way, though.
No, it does. So if they're going to do unrealized gains, it means you also get unrealized losses. You can't have your cake and eat it too when it comes to this kind of shit. It could get pretty funny. It's not going to happen. This is all stupid.
Yeah, it's performative.
Yeah, this is all silly. What they could do, though, and this I don't put past these people, is they might come up with unrealized gains just for crypto. Because they're going to go and they're going to say, and I say crypto because that's how they're going to frame it. It's not just Bitcoin. They're going to say that, like, we have this evil thing that it's gambling and it's also polluting the planet and blah, 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 blah. And because it's not going to affect 99% of the population, they're all going to be, yeah, fuck yeah, let's go get their money. And then could get tricky.
So we've been talking about this for a while. Jay, I'd love to just, if you're still around, I'd love to hear your thoughts on NVK's comment. Jay's already thrown his phone in the trash. Yeah, I'm not so optimistic, NVK. I think this has been, we were talking about it earlier, that this is a narrative that has been pushed for many years, in the US at least. And they keep hammering it because they're trying to figure out ways to classic MMA, modern monetary, or MMT, modern going MMA. When they gut punch the economy via modern monetary theory, which prescribes massive liquidity injections and then overtaxation in order to curb it.
Couldn't both be true? Couldn't the implications of passing something like this be absolutely terrible on so many fronts, but also realistically probably not get passed?
Unless they
this would be incredibly hard to pass.
Wait, so sorry, when you say, wait, NVK, I just want to clarify. When you say both things could be true, I'm unclear. Like when you say, you mean they could try and fail, or they could be trying to pass this because of MMT style rhetoric, and they could also fail at it?
You were saying that I assume the redirect was to me. You were saying that you are not so optimistic, meaning like you're worried or you're pessimistic about this. And I would say you are right to be very concerned about unrealized gains being taxed. But to NVK's point, is that actually a realistic outcome in the short term?
Got it. NVK.
Yeah, so this stuff is not, this is a monumental change, right? This is not, we're going to increase tax or we're going to start taxing carbon or it's a
truly monumental.
It's hard to convey how big this is. Like it changes everything. The same way that source deductions changed everything. It's a whole new world of taxes and affects everything from like chickens to bananas to houses to your baseball card collection, everything. It's huge. And it's practically unenforceable. That's why it's only selective enforcement. Now, they are not going to do this because it doesn't matter if you're left or right. The people who have any kind of power in the world, they all own stocks. So champagne socialists all own stocks, right? So like AOCs of the type definitely own stocks. Pension funds own stocks. And they're not going to want to have this. So they're going to get a backlash from everybody. It doesn't matter which part of political spectrum you are. You're still sucking on the stocks titty. They're not going to do this.
I think you're just assuming that it's going to be one gigantic.
Yeah, so my point, Donna.
But there's a red mark to market on regulated futures contracts, on non-equity options such as bonds, commodities, and currency, and exchange-traded index options. So they could add crypto.
Yeah, so it's as I was saying before, if they're going to do this, they're going to just go for crypto only. Like they can't just go after everybody because you would be a massive flop.
But my only thing is MVK. That's you taking the approach that they don't want it to be a massive flop. That's you saying that they don't want to put us into a position of dependency. Like that's the whole thing. If they did some crazy stuff like this, which I truthfully believe is more of a, like I said, the seeds that have been planting are more of a ploy to move toward a certain direction. What would happen is that they would basically kill a whole lot of the wealth that's in this country. It'll be wealth destruction. People will be forced to sell. We'll wind up getting into a situation where the stock market's on decline. And what happens? You wind up getting everyone into a position where they have to be more and more dependent upon the government, especially those people who are at the bottom rungs of society, because now they don't even have hardly any vehicles. Because you see what's happening in single family residences. You see the freaking hedge funds are buying those up. So then where in the world does the average person that is trying to come up in the world actually build wealth to create generational wealth for their families? Well, they don't. Why? You're not going to invest in stocks because of what they would do with that. You're not going to invest in houses. So guess what? You're going to be more reliant upon the government, which is what people who want big government want, bro. That's the thing we have to watch out for. And I think it's just these types of seeds that wind up being planted. And you start to see, I forgot, somebody said it. I can't remember who said the quote, but there's going to be an America where there are a lot of people who own nothing. Like they have money, they own nothing though. You know what I'm saying? And I think that's what kind of America.
Listen, you're preaching to the choir here. The thing that let me put it this way, okay? If I was alive and around when they brought in source deductions, I'd say there is absolutely no fucking way they're going to be able to put in source deductions and people are going to be okay with that. They used the war as an excuse because they had to fund the war. Now, and they did get source deductions in and stuck around forever. It was going to be temporary. And it's huge to make people to prepay. But the evil of source deduction is that people don't know what they don't already have. So it's a much easier trickery on people. Now, the problem with unrealized gains on normal people's stuff, especially houses, is that is going to force sale and everything. You would absolutely end America, Canada, or any country that does this in any scale because people are up to their nose with debt. So they're not going to find a way to pay those gains at the end of the year. So I doubt that very much. I don't think there's an appetite in any country in the world to be able to pass this stuff through. Aside from places that are fairly wealthy, say Holland has wealth tax. I think, if I remember right, I think it's 1.5% over your net worth. But that kind of stuff won't work in North America. Listen, I can't put anything past these people.
So NVK, when you said source deduction, so what you're talking about, it's the Canadian version of
income tax. Yeah, that's right. Payroll tax. Source deduction is the technical name of that. So it means that you take, for the people that don't understand, is what I'm saying is essentially before you give people their paycheck, you withhold the tax, right? So you take the tax before you pay them. And this was a policy instituted, I think it was in the 30s, to pay for Second World War. And it was meant to be temporary because nobody would ever go for the idea, what do you mean you're going to take the money from my paycheck? That's insane.
We were talking about this earlier, that these are all meant to be temporary measures, but they never are. They are always permanent. It's everything from like bridge tolls to taxation and basically everything that's passed that takes money from you and gives it to the government.
I've been bitching about source deduction forever, and I don't even pay source deductions.
And I think source deduction is basically the same thing as income tax in America.
Income tax withholding.
Got it.
Withholding.
Interesting.
From a commie point of view, it's quite brilliant, really, right? You take the tax before people have it in their pockets. They're not going to feel as bad about giving it away.
You never knew you had it.
That's right.
You never knew you had it. And then when you overpay, you get a refund. So you're happy.
Yeah.
Like, it sounds so funny because I'm listening to MVK say it, and I'm like, man, that's how it's been since I've been working. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of we've already bowed down to that. You know what I mean?
Oh, 100%. Fuck. On my paycheck, on my paycheck, I look through every time and I'm like, all right, so that's the amount that's going to Social Security. Never going to see that ever again. That's the amount that's going to Medicare. Never going to see that shit ever again. Like every line item, I'm just like, yep, that's just the government taking its cut and shoving it up their ass.
It's absolutely crazy that people didn't revolt after. And then again, when people fly out the idea of, hey, maybe we get like unrealized gains and they'll carve out, like, listen, these people are not idiots, right? They are in many senses, but not on this. What they would probably do, if I was putting myself in the evil mind and then I will also carve out, say, cars or anything really that would affect, say, 70% of the population of the country. So now you have a great majority of the country that's unaffected by this tax. And then you have this 30% who's going to whine and cry. They're doing well in the eyes of the rest of the population. So then 2-3 years later, I encroach into another segment of the population, right? Now you have the people who already paid for 2 years saying, yeah, fuck yeah. If you're going to charge me, you're going to charge those two. And then you get the other side of the population who's like more on like a middle to poor side to go, yeah, fuck yeah, charge those people in the middle too. So then you have those in. And then you get it through a couple more years. And then you go after the rest a few 5-6 years later. So you can roll this thing out without much bullshit within 10 years.
Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, we live in very weird times. Did you all see the attack on the Roth IRA as well? Where if you have so much in your Roth IRA, you have to cash it out?
I was listening to that and I felt vindicated because I truly believe that the Roth, especially, and IRAs in general, 401ks, all of that stuff, for anyone who's under 35 is, and maybe even anyone under 40 is just an utter and complete scam. Gosh, I don't even know. Maybe even someone who's under 50 years old is an utter and complete scam.
What's the?
It's not been decided yet. Ron Wyden.
Hey, Pete, you've got quite an echo going on.
I'll be back.
This is why we got to hold our keys, guys. The whole kind of like end conclusion of this entire conversation is that this is what Bitcoin was built for, and hopefully we can use jurisdictional arbitrage to find a safe haven.
Yeah, I'm not currently clear on.
You can't hold on. You can't use jurisdictional arbitrage because U.S. citizens are taxed globally.
I know it's so
there is no jurisdiction unless you plan on living off planet somewhere.
No, you can go to other jurisdictions. You can leave the U.S. Wait, hold on. You can renounce your citizenship, and then all you have to do is pay one. Yeah, exactly. You have to pay 1/2 of your earnings as if you had just sold everything in order to leave the U.S. It's like a roach motel. You can enter, but you can never leave, at least financially. But
just like the 401k rules can change, all the other rules can change too.
That is true. Are you saying that as an optimistic angle?
Yeah, you're very optimistic. I like that.
Yes, absolutely. Like, I know where the leverage is.
The difference this time is if these guys go full retard, right, realistically speaking, people will leave. with their BTC without ever being declared. They will renounce their citizenships and they will go live somewhere with their wealth and be happy and just simply never go back. There is a point of no return with this stuff, right? Most people want to do things kosher. You go, you pay your exit tax or whatever. But there is a point in which people will be forced to go above and beyond what's kosher.
Yeah, but here's the thing, right? And this is what's we were talking about this earlier before you came in, but like the narrative, the shifting of the goalposts and the kind of the narrative orchestration, the propagandizing of these types of concepts is so insidious and over time extremely effective. The fact that people don't understand that that like in California, it's fucking insane that you get taxed on income, sales, and property. Everybody's just, yeah, California has good schools. And it's like, no, it doesn't. That was in the fucking 80s. We're done here. Like it's a fucking wasteland. People are like, this is just what I grew up with. And people just accept it. And so when Yellen gets up and she makes the claim with a totally straight face that, and Biden promotes this article in the White House with a totally straight face, that unrealized cap gains are income. I got to tell you, 90% of people are just, I don't really even know what unrealized cap gains are. Yeah, fuck the rich. And it slowly becomes the norm. And I think that's really the dangerous thing here. I actually don't think that people will just like revolt because they're not actually going to do a China bans Bitcoin style thing. They're going to make these incremental changes that sort of slip under the radar for 80 or 70% of the population. And then suddenly we live in an absolute hellhole and it's quote unquote too late. And then people are resigned to it. They're cynical and they're like, what are we going to do? Leave the United States and have to give up one of my testicles and also give up 80% of my net worth? And you're going to be like, but it was 50% like 3 years ago. And they'll be like, yeah, but this is the world we live in now.
The crazy thing is that, let's just call it the people in the center of the IQ distribution curve, the midwits, like they embrace nihilism, right? Like the PhDs are like, oh, it's nihilism. I'm nihilistic. This is just the world we live in. It's just insane that they don't see a reason to fight back. And that's why I'm optimistic about Bitcoin, because it is that reason.
Such a dire painting right now, man. That is, we should all be leaving right now, because if people just go along to get along, if average people can no longer build wealth in this country to be able to pass down for generations, if at the same time the average wage earner, their jobs are being substituted, they're being actually get substituted for robots and automation, like where do you see the future heading in this country if you guys are all believing the painting you just painted? Like right now, this painting is like the Mona Lisa with a black stripe over her face. You know what I'm saying?
Lamar, but let's put it this way, it's still fairly early, right, for Bitcoin. Like, in another 5 years, say maybe we're talking about real mainstream, people start saving. If they are saving in a 21 million supply, they will still find fairly decent wealth in a fairly short period. So there is hope. It's not fully dead, but it goes down fast. I mean, like, Canadian healthcare system is absolute shit, but people here are fully indoctrinated to believe that this is what's like good, and that's their identity. People identify themselves as people of public healthcare, no joke. And they're told the stories about how bad it is in the US, which is not true for most people. Like, most people in the US don't have to wait 6 months to get like very basic shit. Anyways, it's all a matter of stories.
But that's what I'm saying. What is the narrative? Because you all know, I've talked all the time about this on here. I really believe that what we're seeing is this shift into a government that makes us all more dependent. And if that is the case, and I've heard so many people say, Lamar, I'm not leaving this country. You won't ever get me to leave. But I'm like, if Rome is burning, what do? Do you stick around and watch it burn? Do you play the violin? Like
Lamar, what's on your mind? Like, which jurisdictions are you like thinking about? I'm just curious. Like, what would be your plan if you're going to get out of the U.S.?
Man, do you think I'm going to dox my area? Like, I'm trying to. I've already done all my research. I've done everything.
Never.
Look, I'm sorry, man, but I'm going to dox you. We've talked about your Willy Wonka style elevator that shoots up into the sky. And I don't think that's practical for most people. For you, definitely.
It's not. You're right. You're right. Yeah. And it's full of chocolate in the base.
I know.
So you swim in chocolate just to get up. Yeah, I got you.
I know. But also, I think
seriously, TK, I'm just asking if, I don't know. I listen to us, right? I listen to us as Americans. See, MVK excluded. He's dealing with public health care in Canada. I'm talking about us as Americans in this country. And the whole thing is that in times like this in the past, there have been revolts. There have been people that have stood up. There have been people that marched on Selma. You know what I'm saying? Do we have those same people today is the question. Like, real talk, do we have people who are going to fight a system that is clearly not in the best interest of any of us? Like, it just, period. It's not in the best. Think about it. You say you tax the rich, but you continue to print money, which is at the chagrin of every person that earns wages. Like, you're killing them.
Wait,
who's going to rise against if most of the people are on the tits?
That's the point of the dependency, right? Because if I make you ultimately dependent upon me, then there will come a point that you will not be able to fight me, because without me, you don't exist. And that is what I'm saying. And that type of dependency is where control is. And that's why we all need to be focusing on as much sovereignty as we possibly can have. We need to get sovereign food, sovereign everything, because as we continue to move towards a state of dependency, you wind up getting yourself into a position where you can no longer even interact without being dependent upon. It's the matrix. You'll be plugged in at that point. You feel me?
100%. And I guess what CK was getting at is you were framing it as a question like, man, y'all are some dark motherfuckers. But I think we're all on the same page that like,
yeah, I think so. I'm just saying, like, I just wanted to enter that question to get that conversation going. What do you do? What's the solution? We all hear the problem. We know the storm's on the horizon. There's a storm out on the ocean and it's coming this way. The question is, what do we do, man? I know we all buy Bitcoin. That's the first step of having sovereign money.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Right?
Yeah, I was going to say, I hear you, Lamar. I do want to give Preston and Shinobi, you change your name every fucking time. Yep. And also Luke a chance to speak. Preston, famed Marmot coin creator, Marmot herder, small dog attack vehicle creator. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I've thought about this at length. So let me just say that I've been in bed for the last 3 days because I screwed up my back. So I haven't gotten any client work done, which is really annoying. But what I have managed to do is have a really good crack at learning Morse code. So which NVK has been keeping track of my journey as I've become a bigger and bigger ham radio. And I think, like, how do you prepare? I think one thing that people really haven't considered about what we're going through now is that it's this like really weird, slow collapse where we're starting to see things get jankified, right? So there's some general jankification of society. The jankification is starting to manifest itself in really funny ways, like the fact that you can't buy a car, or the fact that certain supermarket shelves are empty, right? Or the fact that restaurants can't hire people despite the fact that there are lots of people looking for work. So something broke in a weird kind of way. And we're really only going to fully understand what broke and housing prices are ridiculous. They're going up 20, 30% a year. So something broke very badly and nobody's quite sure what. And there's some underlying sickness, right, in society. I'm not sure what it is. People are angry. COVID-19 is part of it, but like our response to COVID-19 didn't cause the price of cars to go up. Our response to COVID-19 did. And so
Even 19 though, guys, I think we're missing the forest for the trees. It's the conclusion of the long-term debt cycle. What we're seeing now is, in my opinion, just the thin edge of the wedge of what's to come. If you zoom out to the last time we had debt levels this big in the 1930s and 40s, you're seeing all the similar kind of things play out here in the 2020s. Okay, you're seeing gold confiscation with the FDR, 1933, 1940s they had food stamps, It was food rationing, all of this. It's what they have to do with a debt bubble this large. And it's all part of a much bigger movement and a much bigger plan. I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with Laserhodel's thesis of essentially a central bank digital currency kind of system being exported to the Western world, but that's what it's all about. You're watching the World Economic Forum come out and say, capitalism has failed. We need to reimagine capitalism. We need to adopt, what do they call it? Stakeholder capitalism. This is all just part of a plan, in my opinion.
Yeah, very old plan.
I remember 2008 very vividly because at the time I was a law student, but I was joining a securitization group at a law firm in London. And I joined them in 2009, having gotten the job in 2007. In England, it's a weird system where you apprentice and you're hired years in advance when you're still a student, whatever. So I was paying super close attention when that happened. And I remember the issue was that there was risk built up in the system that people didn't know how to. The big problem with the global financial crisis is that there was risk in the system that people didn't know how to account for. They didn't know who was solvent and they didn't know who wasn't. And so as a consequence, there was a huge contraction of liquidity because no one was going to lend to anybody else because no one was which entity was a house of cards and which one wasn't. So that caused the contraction of credit, which caused the contraction of the economy, yada, yada. And it took years to work through all of that. Now we're in this kind of weird go-go economy where money's just sloshing around, no problem. People are spending it hand over fist. There seems to be no end in sight. Everything's doing really well. The stock market's doing really well. And I'm just getting like tangles of 2006 with like rap videos of guys running around throwing euros in the air and all the rest of it. And yes, we're in the middle of a pandemic, so maybe the consumption isn't that conspicuous. But notwithstanding, the markets are clearly insane. Something is really wrong. And I'm not sure, and I can't quite put my finger on it. But what I do know is that I think there's going to be a de-risking or a deleveraging at some point, right, in Western societies. Whether that's today, tomorrow, 2 years, 5 years, I don't know. But when that debt falls due, when it comes time for that debt to be paid, and some people say it never will, but it will one way or another. They're going to default. The U.S. national debt is a prime example. That's going to get defaulted on one way or another. They're either going to inflate it away, or the country will collapse, or they will default, or whatever else. There's no prospect that or the debt of any other major Western country is ever being paid back. And so then there will be major consequences from that de-risking that they do, because it'll basically be like, it's a rubber band. You pull and you pull and you pull and you pull and you pull, and eventually you let go and it snaps back, right? They've been reallocating risk constantly, social risk. And there are two guys who really deal with this well. One of them is Jürgen Habermas, he's a Marxist, German fella. And he talks about something called the legitimation crisis, which is where you have societies that just rack up risk, political, social, and otherwise, in the form of debt, so much that eventually it becomes overwhelming and it starts to affect the government's ability to carry out programmatic demands that it sets for itself. So where we're seeing that, for example, would be I live in Connecticut, by way of example. Connecticut has $100 billion of unfunded pension liabilities. And we're a small state. So that's like $70,000 for every man, woman, and child in the state of Connecticut. Connecticut will never pay those back. So people are it's either going to default on its pension obligations, get bailed out by the federal government, or something else. But there's no way that they're going to be able to rustle up $70,000 from every single person in the state of Connecticut to pay those dues. So that's an example of something where we're in the sort of early phases of state failure. We know that something's going to happen, but we're just not sure what that thing is. It's just it's a time bomb, right, waiting to go off.
So with that in mind, okay.
Joseph Tainter, he's a collapse theorist, and he talks about how societies eventually become too unwieldy and complex, and then what happens is they disintegrate into more efficient forms where you don't necessarily need large bureaucracies to maintain them. And I think that where we are now is that the government has constantly expanded for the last 120 years, and particularly after World War II and the Great Depression. And there's never been any retrace, right? It's always been growth of the state. And so as a consequence, we have this thing that's just not fit for purpose. There's institutional inertia. Nothing has changed. And the world is changing under its feet, with the consequence that we've got this big lumbering beast. And we could pay off the debt if we automated away most of the bureaucracy and kept our tax receipts the same. But no, there's no political will to do it, so we're just going to collapse. That's my view.
We keep coming back to this idea, though. I don't think anyone on the stage, or I think there are probably aspects of what you said that some people disagree with. I don't disagree with it, though. But what do we do in that situation? We all own Bitcoin. We're all hardcore Bitcoiners. We all have a knife that says Bitcoin etched on the side that we wave around wildly at parties and try to convince people to buy Bitcoin. But given the scenario that you just laid out, what do we do as Bitcoin?
Get out here.
Oh, go ahead, NVK.
Oh, wait, sorry. So it was a tangent on supply chains. Maybe this helps people understand maybe what to do. But so I'm developing this theory that the problem really goes back a bit. There was, even maybe slightly before 2008, there was no way we could come up with the sort of proverbial deflationary prices for technology without making technology just in time, because inventory costs a ton. So for you to have all that opportunity cost sitting in a warehouse is unrealistic. So supply chains became just in time. That's how you decrease cost. So slowly and surely, for many years, I thought like, hey, it's just maybe hard to get good timing on parts because we're not the size of Toyota. That was like how I thought about some of this stuff, because we share some chips that those car makers use. And I couldn't fully comprehend that, like, why can't I pay and get the stuff? Like, it makes no sense to me. As we grew and could, like, just fuck it, we're just gonna like stock bigger quantities of chips that we know we're gonna use for years. It became clear, it's just there is no production capacity. Absolutely no production capacity and products are overly complicated, right? Like even a stupid little toy has hundreds of either parts or steps to get made. It's a domino of issues there. And then all that this stupid COVID lockdown shit did was just give us a glimpse, really, of what's to come, which is we have incredibly fragile supply chains on a good day, and we have absolutely no production capacity to fill the demand need. So I think we are in for some very interesting supply shocks in the next coming years if credit is cheap, right? Because still baffling to me, I was like bitching about this maybe 6 months or so ago. Like, how is it possible that the world is like literally ending, right? In mid-pandemic for the average person in say January this year. Everybody's going to die, but you cannot buy an overboard motorboat. That is probably the last thing people are going to buy if the world is ending, right? Like, and it's fascinating because overboard motors are mostly made in Japan for any size that's not a tiller size motor. And so you have a fairly like constrained supply chain complexity because it's just in a single geography. So essentially, you have cheap credit. Everybody is bored and buying every fucking thing they can. And then you have the checks going to people and they're buying all this stuff. You have no production capacity. You have essentially there's 50 ways the world economically could end. So what I'd say is really think about the stuff you're going to need in the next 2 years and maybe stock it because it could get tricky.
There's going to be a compounding effect to that. And I think what's crazy is I totally agree with you, NVK, that we're going to see a lot of supply chain crises. But I also think that a lot of people are going to blame it on inflation. So we're going to just have a really fucking strong inflation narrative when it's really just the complexities of globalization breaking down, really breaking everything else.
One thing I've seen, I got a sort of taste of, I think I think that we are underestimating the effect that sort of a rebalancing of consumption has had away from services and towards durable goods and consumer goods. Like I have never saved so much money as I did during the pandemic. It was amazing. And so now I'm doing stuff as NVK knows. I'm like turning around and buying ham radios because it's just like $1,500 because why not? So It's interesting. A lot of my clients are in the Chia ecosystem, and I know this is a Bitcoin room, so I apologize for bringing up a shitcoin. But one thing that we saw in the spring, Chia works by mining using hard drives, similar to Filecoin, but not quite.
well, it's more than that. It destroys hard drives.
It destroys SSDs, and it doesn't destroy. So you store the things on spinners, and then you plot using SSDs. But they've managed to get the writes way down on the SSDs. So basically, the original plotting thing that they, just for everyone's general edification, the original plotting program that they had wrote something like absolutely stupid, like 1.8 terabytes of writes for a 100 gigabyte plot, which like will take a normal consumer SSD and wreck it in 2 weeks, which is like insane. It took 8 hours. But some enterprising guy who's an early GPU farm or a GPU miner figured out how to cut that way down. The program's called Mad Max, if you're interested in looking it up. Anyway, I digress. But what happened was there was a bit of a frenzy in like sort of April, which has since died down, where the demand for hard drives globally, right, in the retail channel, which is about 10 or 15% of global hard drive demand, went up by 2 or 3%. And as a result of that, hard drives everywhere completely sold out, right? Because the hard drive manufacturers planned this quarter a year ago, and they said, this is how many we need to produce now, and this is what our production capacity needs to be, and blah, 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 blah. And then all of a sudden there was this unexpected surge in demand, and then hard drives just disappeared, right, for 3 months. You couldn't get a 20 terabyte or 18 terabyte hard drive anywhere. Now that's changed, right, as everything has like calmed down and gone normal. But that gives you some idea of how a very modest change, 1 to 2%. So I think the global drive market annually is something like 100 exabytes or 150 exabytes. And so that was like a 10 exabyte change, resulted in a absolutely like catastrophic disruption of supply chains where like people who are running servers couldn't get hard drives for their websites. Like it was ridiculous.
It was particularly
That's
funny.
One thing to consider.
It was particularly funny because the whole premise of Chia was like, we're going to save the environment. And producing hard drives is not the cheapest thing, nor is it the most environmentally friendly.
Yeah, there is that. The e-waste argument didn't go away. I think they're still holding on to the power consumption argument.
That 10%, was that 10%? Yeah. Was that 10% of annual production, or was it 10% of total like hard drives that are active?
More importantly,
10% of the annual hard drive market worldwide. I think it wasn't 10. I think it was like 1 to 2%.
More importantly, let's get back to Bitcoin.
But anyway, back to Bitcoin. Anyway, but just to give you some context, like with that supply chain, there were a couple of things playing there, chip shortages, various other things. But even a very modest rebalancing of demand wound up throwing the entire, and that's just like a crypto-related story, so I figure everyone can relate. But like that very minor change resulted in a massive change to the market itself. But I think with what we're looking at, we're also considering, if crypto people looking forward on a 5 to 10 year, maybe less, shorter time horizon, you've got social things that could be an issue, you've got wars that could be an issue, cyber attacks are another issue. And all of those, right, can take out chunks of the supply chain and increase the general levels of jankification in the society. So there's a huge amount of disruption which is capable of being done. And COVID has just basically showed the Americans, it showed our adversaries, it showed everyone else. All right, well, if you lean on this and you lean on this, you take this computer out, you take that computer out. How do you then affect a society, and what pressures can you put on that society as a result? So it's going to be a really interesting decade.
Don't forget climate change too. Who was the Democrat in the news the other week saying that, oh, look out, climate change is going to raise the sea levels and it's going to impact ports. And guess what? That's going to cause inflation in the coming years. So they're all just narratives to disguise what's really going on. And that's
exactly.
It's all monetary reset. And this is all the whole unrealized capital gains. It's just the thin edge of the wedge. If you go and read Klaus Schwab's book, he's the head of the World Economic Forum. He's directly telling you we need to reimagine capitalism. We need to implement this kind of social credit scored communism model across the world. And that's how we're going to do it. Everybody's going to consume the energy based upon their carbon credits and their social credit score. And you're even watching MasterCard come out recently. What did they come out with last week? Everybody's going to have a carbon limit on their credit cards. So
I know, it's fucking ridiculous. It's so upsetting.
COVID vaccines, right? I don't care how people feel for or against. That's not the point. But that's the first sort of like North American West like experience with like you're good and you're bad.
I just want to let you know, NBK, you have successfully completed my bingo card. So far in this conversation, we haven't mentioned vaccines yet, but
But that gets back to Lamar's earlier point as well. What do we do? Where do we go? Do we have a large enough population who's able to revolt? And obviously, look at the population of the hardcore Bitcoiners like us who understand all this stuff. It's probably only, 0.1% globally? But when you look at the people who believe in medical and bodily autonomy, you're looking at 20 to 30% of the population. Like, they're all Bitcoiners. They just don't know it yet. So I think we're going to be fine. But to Lamar's original question, where do you go? This is a global debt problem. Every single country around the world has an absolute debt crisis. So I think Shinobi was going to touch on it earlier. You get local, you get out of the cities. Klaus Schwab and his cronies at the World Economic Forum and the IMF, they're going to try and implement this central bank digital currency system on the other side of the failing one that we're operating in at the moment. But I think it's going to fail in the long run. You just need to wait it out in this transitionary kind of timeline.
Absolutely. And I do just want to jump in. Shinobi has shown more restraint than I've ever seen him show. Shinobi, please give us your thoughts.
Get the fuck out of the cities. Rodolfo said, stockpile anything that you're going to need that's part of a complex supply chain you can't produce yourself. Start producing your own food, whether that's grow a garden, whether that's chickens, whether that's cattle, if you have the land to. Do it. You can't do that? Find your neighbors who can and buy shit from them. Like, we need to get the fuck out of the city and localize as hardcore as we can, and then hopefully never actually have to pull the guns out. But it might actually get to that point.
What's your opinion on hunting and eating no-coiners?
No comment.
Too salty.
Ooh, sick.
Yeah, meat is good. Human meat tastes like squirrel, man. And not the good kind of squirrel, like the kitty squirrels.
I actually think that the higher economic value is in harvesting the tears of the no-coiners and the altcoiners that flow freely down their face. That actually is an incredibly effective cooling agent for ASIC miners. And I actually think that we won't eat them, not because we have moral issues around it, but because the tears are just so much more effective as a...
Those are our electrolytes, man. That's going to be like Gatorade. We're just going to call it Haterade for all the people that hated on Bitcoin over the years.
Yeah, little known fact, it's actually the only renewable resource that's truly renewable.
There you go. All right, my friends, we've been going for 3 hours straight. This has been an amazing conversation. I'm going to close it out.